Chapter 1155. After several battles, Yun Xiuxin's innocence had long disappeared. Now, with a sword in one hand and a guard in the other, she moved forward cautiously, not forgetting to look around to see if there were any treasures that she had missed. The situation of the female disciples was similar. At the beginning, they were chased like chickens and dogs, but after some twists and turns, they managed to stabilize their footing and slowly discovered the abnormality. In other words, the process was different, and the efficiency was slightly different. But the experience of the male disciples was completely different. Those who were more experienced, such as Bai Yexing and Sun Mingxiu, had already discovered the subtlety of this realm during the second battle. However, these two had taken it for granted that this realm was set up as a trial, and since the cultivation base of the demon beasts was maintained at the same level as theirs, it was definitely not real. So, how could they gain anything after the battle? Bai Yexing's situation was better. When he killed the fifth demonic beast, he accidentally touched a demon core and realized the truth, and he regretted what he had done. Sun Mingxiu, on the other hand, killed all the way and did not collect a single demon core from the beginning to the end. He did not even take any of the treasures that he encountered. He had entered a mountain of treasures but returned empty-handed. Sometimes, one who was too steady and rational might lose a lot. That was probably what happened to Sun Mingxiu. Compared to the two before him, Hu Xiaofan still maintained his usual good luck, reaping huge profits along the way. Starting from the beginning, he reaped the harvest cleanly, leaving not even a blade of grass untouched. He was even more thorough than Yun Yang. The boy had 3 spatial items with him, but they were all stuffed to the brim. However, no matter what happened, the cultivation base of the residence of 9 Supreme's disciples was soaring. A few girls were so focused on guarding against the attack of the demonic beasts that they were muddle-headed throughout the whole process. It was not until a certain point when the barriers in their bodies disappeared with a boom and they broke through to a higher level that they suddenly snapped out of their daze. How did I break through without knowing it? Time flew by as they broke through and fought. During the whole month, only the first few days were a little painful and frightened. After all, the huge size and ferocious appearance of the demonic beasts were still very intimidating. However, as time passed, the beasts they encountered became more and more ferocious and powerful. However, the fear they had in the beginning disappeared completely. Right now, everyone was thinking about one thing. What kind of demonic beast would I encounter today, and how much of my cultivation would I be able to display? Although killing demonic beasts was physically taxing, and after each battle, one would be half dead from exhaustion, but every victory would result in a lot of spirit materials and demonic cores. If one was lucky, one could even obtain some other things. Not only were there demonic beasts and spiritual plants in the secret realm, but there were also many mineral resources that were hard to find in the outside world. After entering the secret territory, every day that passed, all the disciples would feel, how did time pass so quickly? Another day had passed. The sky was black and white. One day passed. Another day passed. Another day passed. In the blink of an eye, it was already the 20th day. Right now, Yun Yang's cultivation base had steadily increased to the pinnacle of 3rd level Saint King. He was only a step away from advancing to 4th level Saint King. However, he had encountered an inexplicable bottleneck here. In fact, Yun Yang had reached this level 3 days ago. However, after 3 days, no matter how much he battled, exhausted himself, it was of no help to the current bottleneck. His cultivation base did not increase in the slightest. Yun Yang knew that he had probably reached the end of his cultivation this time. It would be futile to force himself to continue cultivating. Decisively, he began to train his self-control. Whenever an accident happened, he would discover it in time and solve the current accident in the most ingenious and effortless way. Slowly, Yun Yang integrated this realization into Saber Truth. Destiny Blade. There was one time when a yellow golden-black tiger suddenly appeared. Yun Yang swung his saber, intending to block the enemy's edge and give himself a chance to turn the situation around. Unexpectedly, the moment the gigantic yellow golden-black tiger's claws came into contact with the divine edge, it howled and its muscular body slid to the side abruptly. When it landed, it even surged forward uncontrollably. Yun Yang's eyes shone. Is this leveraging force to counter force? Leveraging force to counter force was a technique that appeared in many techniques. It was almost the same everywhere, but the intricacies of it were not something anyone could learn. At least, it was impossible to master without a certain level of experience in actual combat. This required impeccable control of strength and countless times of wandering between life and death. Only then could one deflect the incoming force, divert it, or even reverse it completely to attack the incoming enemy. This was a trick that would be difficult to achieve if it were not for countless experiments and practice. Yun Yang's experience during this period of time had given him the opportunity to explore and practice this possibility. As Yun Yang's thoughts raced, he purposely emptied his mind. The saber in his hand swung left and right. Towards the end, the trajectory of each swing was a circular arc. There was another soft clang. The yellow tiger looked at the place where it had landed with eyes full of fear. That place had already deviated from its target by at least 30 feet. Furthermore, my tail. How did it get cut off? With a howl, the yellow tiger ran away with its tail between its legs. It was too frightening. A gust of black wind blew and the yellow tiger disappeared without a trace. Yun Yang did not give chase. He really did not have the mood to pay attention to the yellow metal tiger. Instead, he was deep in thought. His sudden inspiration had not only caused the yellow metal tiger's heavy pounce to deviate from its intended direction, but he had also followed it up with a slash of his saber, cutting off the yellow metal tiger's tail without any hindrance with an untraceable slash. That casual slash just now was a variation of the merciless blade of the Destiny Blade. But previously, he had clearly chopped at the yellow tiger's tail many times, and it seemed like he had only managed to draw some blood. How could that seemingly casual slash cause such great damage? Why was this so? Was it because the swing felt smooth and comfortable? Yun Yang frowned, recalling the swing he had executed just now. It replayed in his mind no less than 30 to 50 times. From the deflecting force, to the bearing of the force, to the borrowing of the force, to the casual half-turn of his body and the casual swing of his hand. The divine edge. Heaven's will has always been high and difficult to question. Heaven's will has always been elusive. Yun Yang's eyes grew brighter. A glimmer of enlightenment rose quietly in his heart. For the next 6 days, Yun Yang had to fight 4 more times a day in this manner. The intense battles allowed him to comprehend the techniques he had just learned. As the cycle repeated itself, Yun Yang gradually realized that his saber truth, Destiny Blade, was evolving and evolving in another direction. While the movements of the saber grew more agile, it also grew more forceful. There are rules and trajectories between heaven and earth. Once the saber moves in line with the flow of heaven's will, it will be indestructible and unbreakable. As the saying goes, the path of my saber is like cutting cloth with a saber. No matter how sharp the blade is, I still have to use a lot of strength to chop the cloth, but I might not be able to separate it neatly. However, as long as I find the right direction and aim, I can easily split it with a very light force. Furthermore, if I allow the saber to use the flexibility of the cloth to cut it, it will only be easier to separate the cloth. Through constant combat practice, Yun Yang increased his understanding bit by bit, improving and perfecting the saber technique bit by bit. In the first 2 days, his saber technique was choppy and sluggish, and there were even mystical beasts that escaped from his hands. However, as time went on, the saber gradually became more complete, and there were no more mistakes. One by one, the mystical beasts charged at him. With the brand new Destiny Blade, Yun Yang dealt with them with ease. From the difficulty of dealing with them to killing them with a few casual slashes, the whole process took only 2 days. When the brand new Destiny Blade was completed, Yun Yang killed a total of 6 mystical beasts in 1 day, and each of these beasts was at the pinnacle of the 4th grade Saint King level. Yun Yang was still only at the pinnacle of the 3rd grade Saint King level. In other words, Yun Yang had surpassed them by a whole level and killed mystical beasts that were almost invincible compared to humans of the same level. According to the common knowledge of the Bound of Universe, the current Yun Yang basically had no difficulty against ordinary 1st grade Saint Venerables. At this time, there were still 4 days left before the end of the trial. Yun Yang's next opponent was a 1st grade Saint Venerable's demonic beast, Rolling Sky Roar. In this battle, both sides were in an extremely desperate state. Although Yun Yang had the enhancement of the newly cultivated technique, under the absolute suppression of the level and the tyrannical power of Rolling Sky Roar, his effectiveness plummeted, and he was unable to defeat the enemy. Technique, even if it's the purest technique, is still only suitable for enemies that are 1 or 2 levels higher than me. Then, when facing humans, I can probably deal with enemies that are 3 levels higher than me. But when facing a mystical beast that is 2 levels higher than me, it's beyond my limit. Is it to remind me of my position by arranging such a mystical beast to appear here in this realm? Or perhaps, to let me know my own limits? But this kind of understanding is probably only reasonable for me. According to the common knowledge of the Bound of Universes practitioners, when facing a weaker enemy, it's natural to crush them all the way. There's no need to use techniques at all. On the other hand, when facing a strong enemy, using techniques to deal with the situation is, in essence, no different from showing weakness. The so-called techniques are only a way to win in defeat. This is an experience that must be firmly remembered. I can't instill this understanding into all my disciples. It's too irresponsible to simply copy it according to my standards, and it's very dangerous. Yun Yang pondered and summarized in his heart, coming up with a clear position for his current comprehensive ability. However, the battle against the sweeping heaven roar was still ongoing. Even though Yun Yang knew that his chances of winning were slim, he had never retreated a single inch. Each time, he would charge forward with the fullest, most spirited will to fight. Again and again, he felt the opponent's powerful strength, clashing again and again. Of course, Yun Yang was not charging forward blindly. He was using this method to search for battle techniques when facing a strong opponent that surpassed his current limit. On the second last day, Rolling Sky Roar was finally forced to retreat by him for the first time. They were evenly matched, and it was no longer Yun Yang who was completely suppressed. Rolling Sky Roar glared at Yun Yang with its large bell-like eyes, as if it could not understand how this weak human had become so strong this time. It was at this moment that Yun Yang suddenly realized that his state of rapid recovery and improvement after being depleted a few days ago had returned once again. This discovery made Yun Yang even more excited. There was not much time left. He had to utilize this rebirth opportunity in the most proactive way possible. Therefore, each time he recovered quickly, he would immediately charge towards the seven-colored vine guarded by Rolling Sky Roar. The seven-colored vine was guarded by Rolling Sky Roar. Anyone who wanted to obtain it would have to defeat Rolling Sky Roar to explore it. On the other hand, this item was equivalent to Rolling Sky Roar's private property. If others wanted it, they would have to fight it. Yun Yang had used this as an opportunity to provoke it again and again. Of course, the rainbow vine itself was something that Yun Yang truly desired as well. The vine's effect was different from ordinary spiritual materials. It was an extremely unique weaponsmithing material. Its powder could be blended with any kind of metal, any metal that was incompatible with water and fire. As long as the powder of the rainbow vine was put in, it would blend seamlessly. Even if it was the mystical heaven gold and earth demon silver, two materials that would explode when they were put together, they would be able to coexist peacefully with the addition of the seven-colored vine powder. Yun Yang believed that as long as he brought the seven-colored vine back, the many rare metals that he had previously collected would be put to use immediately. Now, under Emmy's continuous refinement, all the rare metals were basically left with the most essential parts. Even the stellar raw gold that had been the size of a small hill was now only a lump the size of 2 to 3 people. However, due to the sheer amount and variety, there were quite a number of such lumps of metal essence in the space. The scene when they were piled up was quite a sight to behold. Rolling Sky Roar was very annoyed by the little person in front of it. As a powerful demonic beast, it only had one territory, and this area with the seven-colored vine as the core was its territory. Although it didn't know what the treasure it was guarding was or what it was used for, its instincts told it that this was its territory and this was its thing. Since it was its thing, it couldn't let others take it away for no reason. However, that weak human. No, it should be the fellow who was originally weak but was now growing stronger. He charged over tirelessly, launching wave after wave of attacks. I need to rest too, okay? I'm made of flesh and blood too. Why is a human like you recovering faster than me? Genius in a second. Remember website address. Mobile version, M. Chapter 1156. Please take a leave of absence from I Am Supreme. Currently typing. Please wait a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1157. The heaven-encompassing roar was extremely frustrated. It had not even been 2 hours and the fellow had come again. Another 2 hours and the fellow had come again. Every time, he would be able to beat him to the point that he would flee for his life, but he would return in less than an hour. And it had only been 2 hours. 2 hours was not even enough for it to recover from its fatigue. The heaven-encompassing roar was helpless and dissatisfied with the current situation. However, it could not leave it be. It could only fight with all its might, its heart even more determined. I'd like to see how many times you can recover. Don't ever give me a chance. As long as I can pinpoint an opening, your father will kill you, shatter you into pieces and grind your bones into dust. However, once, twice, thrice. Many times later, Yun-yang maintained a state of rapid recovery. Once he had recovered, he would not wait any longer and would fight again immediately. Once he felt that his energy had been depleted, he would escape at once, never giving the heaven-encompassing roar a chance to kill him. Later on, the heaven-coiling roar's condition worsened. It squatted on a rock and panted heavily, the color of its fur dimming. Because of this, Yun-yang cultivated to recover hundreds of feet in front of the heaven-coiling roar. Obviously, Yun-yang could already confirm that when he was at the end of his rope, the opponent's mystical beast was not much better off than he was. Even if it was not at the end of its rope, it was close to the end of its rope. Basically, when they had reached their limits, they would have no more energy left to move. There was no longer any possibility of the opponent killing him. The heaven-encompassing roar was panting heavily, staring at the human in front of it. It was angry, anxious, and hateful. You said you can't beat me. Why aren't you King leaving already? What do you mean by wasting your time here? If this goes on, I won't be able to hold on any longer. Besides, how can a human like you recover so quickly? Are you still human? You're clearly trying to piss this beast to death. Especially this time. I'm about to die from panting. It watched as the human's breathing gradually steadied. Slowly, he opened his eyes and smiled at it. The heaven-encompassing roar's eyes were red. As expected, the human stood up again. The heaven-encompassing roar was trembling. It was filled with grief and indignation. Are you still human? How can you recover faster than me, a beast king? Fine. I admit that you are worse than a beast, okay? When Yun-yang was done with his recuperation, he stood up and shook his head before he pulled out the divine edge with a clang and charged forward with a loud cry. The coiling heavens centipede roared. It forcefully raised its spirit and charged forward. Even if this king is not in his best condition, this king will not be afraid of you. But this time, the heaven-sweeping roar was getting more and more out of sorts. It seemed like this human was getting stronger and stronger, to the point where he could threaten this king. Every slash that landed on its body was extremely painful. Wasn't this proof of this point? After fighting for less than a quarter of an hour, the heaven-sweeping centipede let out a loud roar, and a huge circle of fire appeared all over its body. Yun-yang took a step back, holding his saber with one hand, fully focused. This was the killer move heaven-sweeping roar was about to be used. This technique had caused Yun-yang to suffer quite a number of losses previously. He had almost been defeated by it during their second encounter. However, what was out of his expectations was that after the heaven-sweeping centipede roared, it actually jumped out of the battle with a whoosh and fled without looking back. It even abandoned the spiritual medicine that it had guarded for so long. Yun-yang obviously did not expect this to happen. He was stunned and did not follow up for a long time. Xueqi, you are a 4th-level Saint King Pinnacle Cultivation Base, a demon king who is half a step to Supreme Saint. You actually ran away with a feint. This is too illogical. It really makes me sprain my waist. However, Yun-yang was already very satisfied to be able to defeat the heaven-sweeping centipede and obtain the rainbow vine. Even though the enemy had left, Yun-yang did not slack off. He went forward to collect the rainbow vine and even dug out a large piece of rock where the vine grew, moving a small mound that was a few hundred feet wide and a few hundred feet deep into his deific consciousness space. Emmy was shocked by the scene. What in the world had come in? There were only 30 days to cultivate in the arcane realm. No matter how reluctant it was, the wheel of time would never stop moving. It had already reached the last day of the arcane realm. It was also on this last day that Yun-yang, who had just defeated the Supreme Saint King, heaven-sweeping centipede, was quietly waiting for the final moment to arrive. To Yun-yang, he had gained too much in this arcane realm and was no longer greedy. Therefore, on the last day, he did not deliberately search for the whereabouts of other mystical beasts, nor did he harvest any more heaven and earth treasures. However, just as he was calming down and thinking about his gains during this period of time, he was shocked to feel the qi in his body suddenly surging, almost uncontrollable. The qi and blood in his body continued to surge, gradually climbing to a certain peak. At that moment, His entire body was filled with a feeling like it was about to explode. Then, in that instant, the meridian barrier in a certain part of his body suddenly shattered. A large amount of mystical qi, which had been unusually abundant and had nowhere to vent, took this opportunity to rush out, surging violently. He had broken through to the 4th level of Saint King. Yun Yang suddenly felt like he was floating. The eternal restraint of the earth seemed to have disappeared at this moment. There was a common understanding among high-level cultivators in the bound of universe. It was extremely difficult to advance from the 3rd level to the 4th level of Saint King. It was even more difficult than ascending from the 4th level to the Supreme Saint King. This was because this was a bottleneck in the path of cultivation. It required cultivation base, opportunity, and providence to reach a critical point in order to have a chance to cross over. Purely increasing cultivation base and grinding effort would not allow one to break through the barrier of the 3rd level of Saint King. Yun Yang was pleasantly surprised by this breakthrough, but he quickly adjusted his state of mind to carefully appreciate the current unique atmosphere. Feeling the surging mystical qi in his body, he instantly determined that his current ability had increased by almost 3 times as compared to before. A feeling of power that he had never felt before arose spontaneously and was difficult to erase. For a moment, he even dared to assert that if he were to fight with the rolling heaven centipede in his current state, he could take down the Supreme Saint-level demonic beast within 10 moves. Compared to Yun Yang's high spirits and contentment, Emmy in the space was not far behind. It was comparing something and even squeaking from time to time, but its tone was very doubtful. Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat as he focused his gaze and saw that Emmy was focusing on 2 piles of round items in front of it. On one side, there were hundreds of mystical beasts' mystical cores. On the other side, there were only about a dozen of them. They were the mystical cores of the demonic beasts that Yun Yang had obtained in this arcane realm. Speaking of mystical cores and demonic cores, Yun Yang could not tell the difference between the two just from the appearance alone. They looked the same and did not emit any aura, so it was naturally difficult to distinguish them. However, Emmy had clearly noticed the difference between the two and was using its vines to fiddle with the cores, looking through them one by one. Immediately after, a black demonic mist was suddenly emitted from one of the demonic cores, and a powerful force rose and spread out. The countless heterogeneous and malevolent forces that were mixed within it were all on full display. The aura that emerged from the other mystical core, on the other hand, was neutral and peaceful. It would not be a problem to use it for cultivation. If the two were to be compared from this point, the power contained within the demonic core was naturally greater, but it was not suitable for cultivation. While the power contained within the mystical core was slightly lesser, as long as one's cultivation base reached the level of a saint, the gradual absorption of the power within would be sufficient to boost the cultivation progress of a cultivator. Perhaps this is the fundamental difference between the mystical core and the demonic core. Yun Yang came to a realization. Perhaps it's also the difference between mystical beasts and demonic beasts. Before he could examine the difference between the mystical core and the demonic core, Yun Yang suddenly felt the world spinning around him. The scene in front of him changed as if the stars had moved, and countless sceneries flashed past his eyes. The next moment, light bloomed in front of him again, but he was already outside the arcane realm. The place where they stood was the battlefield for the battle of the middle-class celestial luck banners on Mount Pentatir, which was also the starting point for entering the secret realm. However, Mount Pentatir was now empty, without a single soul in sight. As Yun Yang's thoughts raced, silhouettes flashed and appeared again. Xueqi and the others appeared in front of him one after another. All of them wore a look of unsatiated joy. Yun Yang glanced at them. Not a single one of them was missing, and each of them was in high spirits and full of enthusiasm. Obviously, everyone had benefited a lot from the arcane realm this time, and their cultivation base had improved greatly. Yun Yang did not waste any time and waved his hand. "Let's go. Let's go home, we'll talk as we walk." At Mount Pentatir, not being able to see through everyone's real cultivation base was a form of protection during the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner, but now it was a bit of a blindfold. The people in front of them were all on the same side, so it was better to leave this place where they could not see through each other's cultivation base as soon as possible. Along the way, everyone was talking at once, almost rushing to proclaim their achievements and gains. Xueqi was the first to speak. "My cultivation base has advanced to the 4th tier Saint King. That's the first time I've achieved such a cultivation base, isn't it?" Luo Dajong smiled. "What a coincidence. Me too." Then, "Me too," was heard one after another. Ran Qingquang and the others' cultivation base had also reached the 4th tier Saint King. In terms of progress alone, they had actually caught up with Shi Wuchen, who had the highest cultivation base. Yun Yang glanced at the crowd, his face beaming with joy as he said in a low voice, "Everyone has advanced by 2 tiers in this arcane realm, which is really good. But there's one thing. All the treasures of heaven and earth and the demonic cores obtained inside must be handed over to the sect to record your contribution." "All right, understood. No one is allowed to keep the demonic cores for themselves, let alone use them. No matter when." Yun Yang exhorted in a heavy tone. The crowd nodded. Almost all of them agreed to Yun Yang's words without any hesitation. Luo Dajiang asked on behalf of Yun Yang, "Are the demonic cores harmful to improving one's cultivation base?" "That's right," Yun Yang said solemnly. "If one forcibly takes the demonic cores to improve one's cultivation base, I'm worried that one will be demonized, not to mention suffering from qi deviation." Hiss. The crowd sucked in a cold breath when they heard that, especially the disciples, who all had lingering fear on their faces. Fortunately, they did not act on impulse. If they had swallowed the demonic cores directly like Hu Xiaofan, they would have been in big trouble. Yun Xiaoxin raised her hand excitedly and said, "Master, I'm now at the peak of the 3rd tier venerable realm." The little girl obviously felt that she had made a lot of progress, for she looked proud and felt very good about herself at the moment. "I'm at the 3rd tier, intermediate level of venerable," Bai Yexing reported. "The 3rd tier, beginner level of venerable," Sun Mingxiu added. "The 3rd tier, intermediate level of venerable." Hu Xiaofan chuckled and glanced at Bai Yexing maliciously. Bai Yexing looked back at him calmly, his eyes deep. His meaning was self-evident, "Little guy, the same cultivation base doesn't mean the same combat strength. If you're not convinced, you can come and give it a try." The other disciples had also made a lot of progress between the peak of the 2nd tier and the beginner level of the 3rd tier. In this way, the strength of residents of 9 Supremes had taken another great leap after this trial in the mystic realm. When we go back, each of the top 10 disciples will go through a month or 2 of consolidation and training, and then go out into the martial world on their own to gain experience in life. There's no need to cultivate in seclusion in the sect anymore. Yun Yang smiled faintly and said, "I know you've always been looking forward to the days of wandering the martial world." When the disciples heard this, their faces were filled with excitement. They looked at each other with sparkling eyes, eager to give it a try. Their intentions were clear. Shi Wuchen and the others smiled bitterly at each other. There was no doubt that in the hearts of these young boys and girls, the words "wandering the martial world" were like a poem or a painting. Riding horses all over the world, roaming the martial world, punishing the evil and promoting the good, taking the 4 corners of the world as their home, and doing chivalry. Just the thought of it was enough to make one yearn for it. In the martial world, there were friends, hot blood, wine, beauties, legends, heroes, swordsmen, assassins. Wow, how colorful and magnificent it was. But, when one really roamed the martial world, one would know that the so-called wandering the martial world was absolutely different from what one had imagined. What one had imagined before was just a dream. The martial world in stories and the real martial world were not the same thing at all. The people who wrote those stories in the martial world, those authors at least, had never roamed the martial world. When you really roamed the Jianghu, you would definitely want to kill those people who wrote Jianghu stories. What kind of nonsense are these idiots writing? They've never done this even in their dreams. It's fine if you're talking nonsense, but why do you have to mislead others? Why do you have to mislead me? Why? In the past, Shi Wuchen and the others had tasted all the hardships of roaming the martial world. From the bottom of their hearts, they naturally did not want their disciples to follow in their footsteps. However, they understood that their disciples were still dreaming of roaming the martial world, just like they had in the beginning. Not only could they not stop them, they could not even warn them beforehand. This was because they had to experience this cruelty themselves. Only then could it be transformed into a lifetime of wealth. The instilling of external forces could never compare to the cruel truth of reality, which was more solid in the depths of their hearts. Along the way, everyone's spirits were still high. Even Shi Wuchen, who had always looked cold, was smiling, which was rare, not to mention the disciples of the younger generation, especially Hu Xiaofan, who had a jumpy personality. This child's luck was amazing. Not only did his cultivation base improve the most in the arcane realm, He had also reaped a bountiful harvest. The treasures of heaven and earth he had collected were even higher than Xueqi and the others, almost catching up to Yun Yang's. He was envied by many of the disciples. The moment they left the boundary of Mount Fivefold, Yun Yang subconsciously looked back and saw a thick fog suddenly falling from the sky, drowning the entire Mount Fivefold in an instant. In an instant, it was as if Mount Fivefold did not exist, leaving only a thick fog, so thick and deep that one could not see through it at all. Yun Yang's mind raced as he tried to go back the way he had come. However, after a dozen steps, he suddenly lost his sense of direction and felt the thick fog pressing down on him in an irresistible manner. Yun Yang hurriedly retreated, but it took him some time to find the right direction as he retreated. Mount Fivefold had suddenly become a forbidden land that was difficult to set foot in. It is indeed a wonderful place where the creation of heaven and earth gathers. Yun Yang exclaimed. It seemed that this Mount Fivefold would only open after 3 years. 3 years later, I want to be promoted to an upper-class sect here, and even replace the position of Sacred Heart Palace. Yun Yang said quietly in his heart. The group embarked on their return journey, but it was a long one. Along the way, sand and dust billowed in the air, covering the sky and covering the sun. However, in the hearts of Yun Yang and the group, everyone felt that the sun was shining brightly, and they were in an extremely good mood. It was just that when they passed by a patch of forest, Xueqi, who was leading the way, stopped abruptly and made a hand gesture. The entire group stopped immediately and did not move forward. In an instant, the entire place was silent. The group squinted and looked carefully in the direction of the forest. With a wave of Yun Yang's hand, Wu Minghuan and Kong Luoyue turned into 2 wisps of green smoke and floated into the forest without a word. Yun Yang stood with his arms behind his back, looking at the dark forest, his gaze calm and unruffled. After a while, Wu Minghuan and Kong Luoyue flew out, their expressions extremely solemn. What is it? There are many corpses in the forest, a total of 13 of them. Kong Luoyue's gaze was solemn, mixed with a hint of worry. They are from the Black Mountain League, ranked 5th among the middle-class celestial luck banner sections. Other than that, there are no other abnormalities. Yun Yang and the others frowned upon hearing this. No other abnormalities? It was already a huge anomaly that someone from the Black Mountain League had died here. This place was not far from Mount Fivefold, and the Black Mountain League was a middle-class celestial luck banner sect. Their combined strength was even greater than the residents of 9 Supremes. So how could they be weak? How could such an expert die here? Chapter 1158. If it can be sorted out tomorrow, I'll update it tomorrow. I am the Supreme. Please invite another one. Currently typing. Please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 1159. Yun Yang was deep in thought. The Black Mountain League sent a total of 23 people to compete for the banner at the Mount Pentecost. 13 of them died here? Yes, there are traces of an unusually intense battle at the scene. Yun Yang nodded and entered, obviously intending to see what had happened. The rest of them followed him in. In the dark forest, there was a large area with a circumference of several hundred feet. All the trees in this area had been smashed and cleared away. The trees in the surrounding area were also covered with speckles of marks, which should have been caused by the overflowing qi and sharp swords. On the ground, there were 13 corpses scattered everywhere. Some of the corpses did not even look like humans anymore. They had died horribly. Broken blades, swords, and hidden weapons could be seen everywhere. The blood had already coagulated, and a swarm of flying insects were buzzing around it. With a wave of Yun Yang's sleeve, a strong gust of wind blew and the flying insects in the air fell down in droves. All of them died instantly and were sent away by Yun Yang with a breath. The place where they landed was dark. It's the Black Mountain League. We met these people a month ago, but their leader and top expert are not among them. But their sect leader and their #1 expert are not among them. There are also several elders who are not there. Most of the people who died were seed disciples, but not all of them, only 7 people. The others who have not died should have escaped this disaster. Yun Yang frowned. But looking at the traces of fighting, the color of the corpses, the degree of decay, and the color of the blood on the ground, the smell, these people were killed at most 4 to 5 days ago. Xueqi and the rest nodded. They were all old foxes in the martial world, so they could still discern the truth. We stayed in the arcane realm for a month. The people from the Black Mountain League should have left the Mount Pentecost after we entered the arcane realm. Why did so many of them die here after more than 20 days? This doesn't make sense. There must be another reason. Yun Yong murmured to himself. Naturally, no one could answer this question. Even Yun Yong, who was wise, could not answer it. Look carefully. Many of the flowers and trees that have been cut in this area contain some aura. Although it's faint, it's real and different. There's also this strange smell in the air. If you look carefully, you won't be unable to sense it. Yun Yang's sharp gaze scanned the area. Also, the huge marks on the ground weren't formed by the impact of the impact. They're obviously the marks of hooves and claws. We've all fought with many demonic beasts in the mystic realm, so we shouldn't be unfamiliar with the traces of demonic beasts. Yun Yang looked at the crowd. Although the demonic beasts that have attacked us may not be the same ones we've dealt with before, there's no doubt that they've caused this. In other words, the reason why these people from the Black Mountain Union died was because the demonic beasts targeted them. Everyone nodded in agreement with Yun Yang's judgment. Just like what Yun Yang had said, everyone here had fought with various types of demonic beasts. As the saying went, one small clue could tell the general trend. They were definitely experts in the field of damage caused by demonic beasts. Although we can confirm that these are the actions of the demonic beasts, there's a new problem. Yun Yang said, first of all, according to the time, the Black Mountain Union should have returned to their sects to recuperate. Why would they come here and lose their lives? This is already very strange. I believe that there must be something fishy about this. Secondly, the Black Mountain Union suffered heavy casualties. The Black Mountain Alliance suffered heavy casualties this time. Even though they were not completely wiped out, they were not far from it. Under the hard work of the Sacred Heart Palace in the Bound of Universe, no demonic beasts have appeared in the areas under their jurisdiction for many years, let alone such powerful demonic beasts. How did they appear here? Wuchen looked at each corpse and said, there's one more thing. Although the battle was intense, it was very short. The battle started almost immediately after the encounter, and it ended not long after. Therefore, it's still too early to say if the Black Mountain Union was completely wiped out. I'm guessing that when the Black Mountain Union was attacked by the demonic beasts, some of them died on the spot, and some of them managed to escape. There's a high chance that the attacking demonic beasts would continue their pursuit. Luo Dejiang was puzzled. But if that's the case, those who escaped from the Black Mountain Union were still alive. If they were completely wiped out, the demonic beasts should have come back to destroy these traces. The demonic beasts don't tolerate humans, so they wouldn't have left such obvious traces behind, would they? If the Black Mountain Union were not completely wiped out, they should have come back to see what happened after such a long time, or at least to collect the corpses, right? But the reality is that the people from both sides didn't come back. This is another suspicious point, isn't it? Yes, it's indeed suspicious. Ren Qingquang came back after a careful inspection and pointed in a direction. The Black Mountain Union should have broken out of the encirclement there and escaped. The demonic beasts on the Demon Clan side should have also gone after them from this direction. Their combat strength should be no less than 20. With this combat strength, it's more than enough to continue attacking the Black Mountain Union. Lon Ruojuan said, I've checked carefully. There are indeed only human corpses here. There are no corpses or remains of any demonic beasts. Could the strength of the attacking demonic beasts be so strong? Tai Qingsong said, I've also noticed something. Apart from displaying their natural power in their beast form, the demonic beasts also showed traces of using weapons to attack. This means that at least a considerable number of the demonic beasts participated in this battle in human form. And the demonic beasts that could transform into human form must at least be at the level of a demon general. The crowd chimed in one after another, and in a short time, they had analyzed and reconstructed about 70 to 80% of the situation. It was almost as if they had seen it with their own eyes, but their cognitive judgment had won the admiration of the disciples. Except for a few, the rest of the disciples felt their minds go blank when they saw the corpses all over the ground. They could not figure out anything. It was only after listening to their master's conversation that they realized that so many things could extend from this mess. We've known each other for a long time. Let's work together and bury the corpses. Yun Yang sighed. Remember to set up a tombstone later so that the Black Mountain Union can find them. After all, they are high-level human cultivators. We can't let their corpses be exposed in the wilderness like this. Should we go after them and see what's going on? Asked Xueqi. Yun Yang pondered for a moment, then shook his head and said, as far as we can see, the combat strength of the demonic beasts is far above ours. Even if we go after them, we won't be able to do anything. Moreover, we have brought so many inexperienced disciples with us. If we act rashly, not only will it be futile, but we will also invite death upon ourselves. Wuchen, Qingcong and Ruojuan, the three of you go after them and see what's going on. But it's limited to scouting. Make sure your safety is the first priority. The rest of us will bring the disciples back to the mountain at full speed. Don't act rashly. All right. Shi Wuchen, Tai Qingcong, and Lan Ruojuan left at lightning speed. Just as everyone was burying the corpses, Yun Xiaoxin suddenly cried out, Master, look over here! When she flipped over a corpse, she was shocked to see that the dead man's hand was under his body, and in his hand was a colorful bird feather tightly clenched. The feather was 3 feet long, and there was an inexplicable aura flowing faintly on it. It was filled with a sense of gloom and danger, striking fear into the hearts of those who saw it. Delighted, Yun Xiaoxin tried to break the feather, but it did not break. With a casual wave of her hand, she easily cut a foot deep into the tree without injecting any mystical qi into it. Everyone could not help but look at each other in shock. A bird feather that seemed to have fallen from a demonic beast was actually comparable to a divine weapon. Yun Xiaoxin played with it in her hands, looking like she could not bear to put it down. Yun Yang frowned but did not say anything. There was a new grave in the forest, and the tombstone on it read, Grave of the 13 Disciples of the Black Mountain Union. The residence of 9 Supremes. The moment Yun Yang led his disciples through the forest and saw the road on the opposite side again, everyone had a feeling that life and death were indeed unpredictable. However, the unexpected change was like taking a stroll in the netherworld. Yun Yang was puzzled and even surprised by the feeling. Although the change was unexpected, it was not dangerous for the people of the residence of 9 Supremes. Why did he feel relieved? This was very unusual. Could there be some demonic beast spying on them in some way that could hide from his spiritual sense? As he thought of this, he was already holding a few pieces of ethereal amethysts in his hand. If the other party could annihilate the Black Mountain Union, they could definitely annihilate the residence of 9 Supremes. Yun Yang was very clear about this. It was at this moment that a long sharp cry suddenly rang out in the air. The entire forest was instantly filled with a terrifying atmosphere of death. Waves of invisible demonic qi spread out, enveloping the surrounding hundreds of kilometers. Even the sky suddenly darkened. Oh no! Yun Yang did not even bother to lift his head. With a wave of his hand, pieces of ethereal amethysts flew out and formed a protective formation around the people of the residence of 9 Supremes. In the blink of an eye, the last piece of ethereal amethyst was planted into the ground. As Yun Yang exerted force under his feet, he sent the other 10 ethereal amethysts, which were the eye of the formation, into the ground beneath his feet. A thick fog rose, forming another barrier under the heavy demonic qi to protect the people of the residence of 9 Supremes. In the blink of an eye, a protective formation was formed perfectly. Almost at the same time that Yun Yang's formation took effect, a humongous bird appeared in the sky abruptly. When it spread its wings, they were 1,000 feet wide, blocking the sun completely. All that could be seen was darkness and haze. As the giant bird descended, sand and pebbles flew in all directions. A powerful force came crashing down from the sky with a sharp whistle, heading straight for where the people of the residence of 9 Supremes were. On the other side of the powerful force was a large shining golden claw that came crashing down. Boom! The entire land, as well as the surrounding mountains, shook because of this sudden attack. Although Yun Yang and the others were in the protective formation and were only affected by the aftershock, they still felt dizzy. Yun Xiaoxin and the other disciples lost their footing and fell to the ground one after another, their faces pale and their eyes filled with fear. It was only a single attack from a demonic beast, but how could it be so powerful? The attacking demonic beast must be at least at the level of a supreme saint. Yun Yang came to a conclusion in an instant. A supreme saint demonic beast, and a flying one at that, and not just a beginner. No wonder the Black Mountain Alliance was defeated so badly. At this moment, an unusually strange voice rang in the air. Who is down there? What an exquisite formation. The tone was like two pieces of iron colliding together, indescribably harsh and sonorous. Yun Yang said faintly, I wonder which demonic senior is in the air? We humans and the demon race have minded our own business for many years. Today, the demon race has invaded our border and killed our people. What is it for? The demonic beast continued to circle in the sky, sweeping up a large amount of sand and stones, causing dust and sand to fill the sky within a radius of several hundred miles. Many ordinary people were swept up, dancing in the air, letting out miserable wails that went unnoticed by the ears. The sonorous voice rang out again with a hideous laugh. Which sect is the young man from down there? Mind our own business? Where did this come from? The war between the demon race and the human race has never stopped for so many years. When has there ever been peace? Human beings are despicable and shameless. They have invaded our border, abducted our demons, conspired against our descendants. Why can't I come in and kill them? Yun Yang said coldly, every wrong has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. With Senior's extraordinary martial strength, is it right for you to kill the innocent? Innocent? Is it right? The voice in the air grew more and more intense. Who in the entire bound of universe is really innocent? Is it right for you to kill the weak of the demon race at will? Yun Yang's mind raced and he gave up on debating. The flying demonic beast in the air had obviously reached a certain level of extreme thinking. There was no use in arguing and it would be a waste of breath. Just as the voices of their arguments faded away, the whooshing sound rang out again. Innumerable heavy forces that could move mountains and fill up seas bombarded the defense formation continuously. Fortunately, the defense formation that Yun Yang had set up was complete, and Yun Yang continued to perfect and replenish it, maintaining the formation at its strongest state of defense. Even though the attacks of the demonic beasts were getting stronger and fiercer, the people inside the formation did not feel as strongly as the first time, and they gradually calmed down. A moment later, the storm-like attacks in the air stopped abruptly, and the sky returned to their sight. Obviously, the huge demonic beast was gone, but no one felt at ease because the strong sense of danger was still clear, as if it was within their reach. Yun Xueqi and others were not the ones in charge of the formation, so they could only sense what was happening outside, so their knowledge was relatively limited. On the other hand, Yun Yang, who was in charge of the formation, had already noticed that although the huge demonic beast was gone, there was another thin figure in golden robes standing with his hands clasped behind his back, his sharp eyes staring thoughtfully at the defense formation that was shrouded in thick fog. Although the other party was only standing with his hands behind his back, watching with cold eyes and not making any other movements, he gave off a feeling of being immovable and unshakable. This kind of perception was even more awe-inspiring than when he was facing the continuous attacks of the demonic beasts, and it was also more difficult to fathom. The slender eyes of the man in the sky suddenly shot out a golden gleam. Looking at the formation below, he snorted coldly and said, I'm the Golden Condor King. Junior, do you dare to tell me your name? Yun Yang smiled and said, I'll let you know that I'm Hua Yunfeng, the Deacon of Sacred Heart Palace. If you know what's going on, leave now. As soon as Yun Yang said that, Yun Xueqi and others were dumbfounded and speechless for a long time. What did I hear? Did I hear it wrong? But when they saw the same look in the other's eyes, they all knew that they did not hear it wrong. So, Boss Master, His Lordship is wrong? Up above, the Golden Condor King said mockingly, So you're the Deacon of Sacred Heart Palace. You're indeed extraordinary to have such a profound knowledge of formations. Humph, if you're not the Deacon of Sacred Heart Palace, I'm afraid you won't be able to support such a formation. But since you're the Deacon of Sacred Heart Palace, why don't you dare to come out and fight me head-on? What? What did we just hear? Did he believe us? Shi Wuchen, Yun Xueqi, and the others exchanged another round of puzzled glances. Yun Yang said faintly, I've never been one to show off my bravery, and I won't fall for the so-called goading. Besides, there are many of my disciples here, so I won't fall for your trick. Are you being reckless? After a moment of silence, the Golden Condor King said lightly, Deacon Hua, your formation is indeed exquisite and I can't break it. In that case, why don't we make a deal? Yun Yang said calmly, Go ahead, Golden Condor King. My son was cultivating in the Demon King's forest, but he was kidnapped by the so-called Black Mountain League. I came out of the mountain in a rage and found my way here, but my son has already been sold to someone else. My heart ached. I know that the power of the Sacred Heart Palace is unparalleled in the bound of universe. Being a deacon means that you have a lot of authority. If Deacon Hua is willing to lend a hand and help me find my son, I will leave immediately without another word. I will not linger, and I will also swear to owe you a favor. I'll be eternally grateful. The Golden Condor King said. Consider it, Deacon Hua. What? The other party really believed what boss, master, and lord of the Sacred Heart Palace had said, and was certain that he was the deacon of Sacred Heart Palace. He even made a request for help? Wasn't this too outrageous and weird? The juniors were a little confused. Yun Yang's thoughts about the Golden Condor King's words were different from those of the residents of Nine Supremes. He could tell that the Golden Condor King's words were full of sincerity and sincerity. As the king of the demon race, he should never lower his head to a human for help. However, this was the territory of the human race in the bound of universe. No matter how powerful he was, it was far less convenient for him to search for missing children in the human world than it was for humans. The status of the Sacred Heart Palace's deacon was extraordinary. As long as he helped sincerely, it was not as simple as doing half the work for twice the result. His words were the law, and no one dared to disobey his orders. As for why the Golden Condor King believed that Yun Yang was the Sacred Heart Palace's deacon so easily, the reason was even simpler. With the Golden Condor King's eyesight, he could naturally tell that Yun Yang's cultivation base was mediocre. It was hard to win people's trust by calling himself the Sacred Heart Palace's deacon, but his formation was so amazing that it was enough to make him invincible. Moreover, the Golden Condor King was a discerning man. He could clearly tell that while Yun Yang's formation was amazing and his wealth was unimaginably rich, the item that maintained the amazing formation was a supreme-grade energy crystal. Even if it was not the rarest supreme-grade spiritual jade, it was still far above it. Yun Yang's wealth was not something an ordinary person could compare with. At least, he was much stronger than the Black Mountain League that he had almost overthrown previously. Combining the above points, he came to a conclusion. Yun Yang was a genius in formations and extremely wealthy, but his cultivation base was not very high. If such a person did not have a considerable background, he would have long been slaughtered like a fat sheep. Therefore, his identity as a Sacred Heart Palace's deacon was actually a logical one. Since he could not shake the Golden Condor King in a short period of time, he could only try to appease the Golden Condor King. The best way to appease the Golden Condor King was to show a considerable amount of kindness. Yun Yang pondered for a moment before saying, "Since the Golden Condor King has said so, it means that you've given me some face. I will definitely pay more attention to this matter in the future." However, looking for a person is still like looking for a needle in a haystack. It's not easy. I can't promise more, I can only do my best. The Golden Condor King said, "I am already very grateful that the deacon is willing to lend a helping hand. I will leave a feather that I've painstakingly given to the deacon. As long as my child is within 100 miles, this feather will respond." Without waiting for Yun Yang to answer, a golden light flashed in the air and a feather descended from the sky. "Deacon Hua, if you can find my beloved child, I will be eternally grateful. I will not go back on my word when I vow to do you a favor." A long howl sounded. "Children, follow me to annihilate the Black Mountain League." A strong gust of wind rose in the air as the Golden Condor King turned into a 1,000-foot-tall creature once again. Flapping his wings, countless huge shadows soared from all directions as well, covering the entire sky in an instant. Heaven and earth were dimmed, and one could not even see their own fingers if they stretched out their hands. After a while, the demonic clouds dissipated, but a large patch of dark clouds soared into the distance, whistling towards the south. Along the way, the Golden Condor King's eyes shone with a golden light as he murmured, "Hua Yun Feng. Hua Yun Feng. Sacred Heart Palace actually has such a formation?" The Golden Condor King and his army had left just like that. Yun Yang waited for a while to make sure that the sense of danger from before was gone before he withdrew the formation and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. This was the first time he had encountered the demon race head-on, but the powerful strength that the other party had displayed had deeply shocked Yun Yang. Dozens of feet away, there was a feather that was 100 feet long stuck straight into the rock. It was emitting a bright light that was like a flame. However, this feather was like a huge flag that stood proudly, invincible. It was only a feather, but the strong light it emitted was enough to illuminate an area of 10 miles. Yun Yang walked forward and could clearly feel the powerful power attached to the feather. Master, how could the Golden Condor King be so gullible? He believed you with just a few words, Yun Xiu thought. This demon race is a little too. The little girl could not finish her sentence. Yun Yang smiled bitterly and said, Believe me? You've underestimated the Golden Condor King. It's fine to say that he believes me, but it's also fine to say that he didn't believe a word I said at all. Looking at the feather, Yun Yang stood still 30 feet away. Then, he used his divine sense to check himself and asked Emmy to do the same. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, he felt relieved and waved his hand, saying, Let's go now. Before his voice echoed in the air, he led the group and left. Not only were the disciples puzzled, but even Shi Bujia, Wu Menghuan, and the others were surprised. That feather is the token that the Demon King gave you. Moreover, it looks like something good. Are you going to give it up just like that? What about the previous promise? Are you going to forget about it? Master Yu. Yun Xiu looked at the feather reluctantly. What a waste. This feather is at least many times better than the one in my hand, isn't it? Yun Yang's face was dark as he led his disciples forward at top speed. It was not until they were 40 to 50 miles away that he slowed down a little and said with a dark face, Do you really think that the Demon King is so easy to talk to? This is a trap, an obvious trap. Wu Menghuan was puzzled. If it's a trap, they could have done it long ago after we left the defensive formation. Yun Yang smiled and said, The trap is not here. He frowned and said, He said that he left the feather behind to ask for our help, but in reality, this feather is hidden in the Golden Condor King's divine sense. But in reality, this feather is hidden in the Golden Condor King's own consciousness. If we really take this feather, then no matter where we go, as long as the Monster King wants to find us, he can find us at any time. This is one of the dangers. Yun Xiu's mouth was agape. Furthermore, with the opponent's holy venerable cultivation base, if he used a divine sense transformation technique on this tail feather, wouldn't it be the same as bringing the demon monarch directly to our home if we really take this tail feather back? As long as the other party wills it, they will be able to arrive immediately. Although the protective formation I used is enough to resist the other party's attack, it needs time to set up the formation. If the other party suddenly appears and catches me off guard, we will be defeated in an instant. If he follows us directly to the residence of 9 Supremes, and this is only our own danger, Yun Yang said faintly. Although he can't hurt us because of our formation, there's no need for him to explain to us why he came here. Ren Qingquang asked in surprise. Isn't the Demon King showing his goodwill to us by explaining the reason? He even said that as long as we find the child, he'll make a vow. That's a vow witnessed by heaven. Once he breaks it, he'll be punished by heaven. Sigh, the so-called vow is the biggest smokescreen. In fact, his explanation includes why he came here and that his child was captured by the Black Mountain Alliance. Yun Yang smiled faintly. I only believe half of this reason at most. Let me ask you, since he's the Golden Condor King's descendant and has grown to the point where he can roam the martial world, what cultivation base should he have? Putting aside the level of cultivation base, who can enter the Demon King's forest to abduct the child? I don't think the Black Mountain Alliance has such an ability. Yun Yang smiled and said, The fact that they killed the men of the Black Mountain Alliance without searching the spatial items of the deceased is enough to prove this. In other words, the purpose of their ambush isn't to search. Since it's not to search, then the disappearance of the child is just a plausible reason that they came here on their own. This reason was spread by themselves. They don't need anyone to believe it. However, if we really help to search, we'll become colluding with them instead. If the Golden Condor King is the enemy of the human race, wouldn't we be traitors to the human race if we colluded with him? As for the vow, since it's not true that the descendant was abducted, how can we find the target in exchange for the other party's favor? The crux of the vow doesn't exist. No matter how much promise we make, it's only a moon in the water, a flower in the mirror, something that can be seen but not reached. Then why do we have to take this? Are we trapped in our own trap? Now the only thing we need to do is to return home as soon as possible and pretend that we know nothing. Sun Mingxiu said cautiously, But, Sect Leader Master, if we just ignore it this time, I'm afraid that in the future. Yun Yang smiled faintly and said, With the Golden Condor King's decisiveness, how can he be ordinary? Since he can't break our defensive formation, he won't waste any more time on us, especially when he doesn't know where we are from. Even if he's looking for someone by name, he'll only look for Hua Yunfeng of the Sacred Heart Palace. If he really meets Deacon Hua, he'll only fight, and there's no other way. Hearing Yun Yang's words, everyone was suddenly enlightened and could not help laughing out loud. It turned out that this was the real reason why Yun Yang had registered Hua Yunfeng's name. The Sacred Heart Palace and the demon race were on completely different sides, and there was no room for negotiation. If Hua Yunfeng really met the Golden Condor King, he could only fight him head-on. But Master, why did he believe you so easily when you gave him a fake name? Yun Xiaoxin was puzzled and asked, since he's a demon king, he should at least have the ability to discriminate, shouldn't he? Yun Yang chuckled and said, it's because he's experienced and knowledgeable that he knows it's impossible for ordinary sects to have such an exquisite formation. Since we can come up with such an exquisite defensive formation and have enough wealth to maintain it for a long time, then it's more reasonable for me to register with the Sacred Heart Palace. Of course, he won't believe it completely. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't believe it at all. Since he can't attack it immediately, he naturally has to change his method. This is the so-called balancing act. Or I should say that he's targeting the Sacred Heart Palace, or perhaps it's a game between the demon race and the Sacred Heart Palace. Yun Yang explained in detail. So we shouldn't get involved in the current matter if we can. We really can't afford to get involved in it with our current weak bodies. It's not about justice or morality. Everyone came to a sudden understanding, and all of them thought to themselves, the other party looks like a stupid, dark, and crude demon king that speaks with utmost sincerity, yet he's actually hiding such sinister thoughts. Isn't it astounding? The group continued forward, picking up their pace. After another 100 miles or so, Xueqi and the other two caught up with them. The Black Mountain Alliance was almost wiped out. Xueqi's expression was solemn. We followed the trail for about a few 100 miles and found some bodies of the Black Mountain Alliance. It seems that only the sect leader and the sect's top expert escaped. Everyone else died a violent death. Tai Qingtsong said, I chased in another direction and found the bodies of the Golden Cauldron sect's people by chance. It seems that not many of them escaped. Everyone's expression changed abruptly when they heard this. Lan Ruojuan wiped away his cold sweat and said, I also saw the Daluo sect's people fighting a flock of golden eagles in the other direction. The situation was not good, but they were still able to hold their ground. I didn't dare to attack directly. After a while, a large flock of golden eagles suddenly came from afar. So I left quietly. If I had intervened, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to return. Yun Yang sighed, his expression solemn as he said, it seems that this is a targeted action by the entire Golden Eagle tribe. I don't know why, but there must be a reason. They are targeting more than one sect. Yun Yang took a deep breath and said, we need to rush back to the residence of 9 Supremes immediately and spread the news as soon as possible, especially to the Sacred Heart Palace. Judging from the situation of the 3 sects with celestial luck banners being attacked, perhaps the few deacons of the Sacred Heart Palace are also targeted. The group grew even more silent as they hurried on at the highest speed. The sky was already dark by the time the group covered 3,000 miles in one go. Yun Yang did not choose to pitch a tent in the wild but found a nearby village to stay in a farmer's house. That night, the sounds of explosions were heard all around them, and it seemed that there was a great battle going on in every direction. There was a period of time when the sounds of battle came from afar and even reached above their heads, but they soon faded away. These were the sounds caused by the battle between top experts. Yun Yang had been sitting quietly, listening to the movements around him. He was meticulous and careful, keeping his guard up. If he had not brought these disciples with him at this moment, he would have gone out long ago with his personality. But now he could not be impulsive, and he could not rashly cause trouble. Yun Yang was not afraid, and he was confident that he would not die. With his abilities and various manifestations, it would be difficult for even the demon race to kill him. But the little fellows he had brought with him could not do so. In the second half of the night, the noise that had been ringing for most of the night suddenly disappeared. There was a dead silence between heaven and earth, so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. After a while, Yun Xiaoxin and the others opened their eyes, still staring out of the window in bewilderment. Practice hard, all of you. Yun Yang said indifferently without opening his eyes. No matter how loud the noise outside is, what does it have to do with you? Being so curious will kill you. Remember, when you travel the martial world in the future, you must never have curiosity. Sleep, all of you. Early in the morning, the group continued on their way back. However, when they passed by a forest, Yun Yang's ears twitched, and he turned his head abruptly. He saw a man slowly walking out of the forest and looking at him with clear eyes. The people of the residence of Nine Supremes stopped and focused their eyes on the newcomer. The man was tall, and had a square face. He was none other than Hua Yunfeng, whom Yun Yang had borrowed a few days ago. But now, Hua Yunfeng's face was pale and sorrowful. He no longer had the bearing and demeanor he had before. Although he tried his best to maintain his previous bearing, he was unable to do so. Sect leader Yun, we meet again. Yun Yang strode forward and asked, Deacon Hua? Why are you here? Hua Yunfeng smiled faintly and said, I'm just a tiger who has fallen. I'll have to ask for your help next, sect leader Yun. Shi Wuchen's expression changed. Deacon Hua, you are badly injured, aren't you? Hua Yunfeng sneered and said, Yes, I am. Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat. Hua Yunfeng's posture showed that he was very defensive. Although he was asking for help, his attitude had not changed much. Sect leader Yun, I need you to escort me back to the Sacred Heart Palace. Hua Yunfeng looked at Yun Yang with a pair of gloomy eyes. It's an urgent matter. Yun Yang only pondered for a moment before he made a prompt decision. Wuchen, you and the disciples will return to the residence of Nine Supremes according to the plan. Then, you will cultivate in seclusion for at least a month, and then let them go out to gain experience. The disciples' first experience must not exceed 3 months. After that, you can do whatever you want. Do you understand? Luo Dajiang took a step forward and said, Boss, I'll go with you. No one. I'll help Deacon Hua alone. I only need to worry about myself and do whatever I want. If anything happens, I can act flexibly, Yun Yang said faintly. You are too big a target to follow. Even if 2 people can work together, it's not as good as 1 person working together, Yun Yang said faintly. Besides, the future of the residence of Nine Supremes is still on your shoulders. How can the burden be so light? Yun Yang stood up and said, Don't stay idle when you go back. The disciples will go out to gain experience, and you will also go out to explore the martial world. Understood. Luo Dajiang understood Yun Yang's meaning in an instant. It was impossible for the little fellows to go out without someone to watch them. Hurry up and go on your way, Yun Yang said. Go now. Then, without another word, he carried Hua Yunfeng on his back and sped in another direction, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Let's go. Shi Wuchen looked in the direction Yun Yang had left in a daze and immediately gave the order. Urging the disciples who were still reluctant to leave, the group set off once more. Not bad. Sect leader Yun is indeed a man of character. You are decisive and bold. Hua Yunfeng was full of praise from Yun Yang's back. Sect leader Yun, I believe you can see that I'm at the end of my rope now. I'm also aware that danger is nearby. So, you made a prompt decision to separate from them immediately. He didn't even want to say a single word of explanation. Such decisiveness is indeed worthy of being a sect leader. Yun Yang said with a chuckle, even Deacon Hua, a man with an extraordinary cultivation base, is seriously injured. How can a group of small fries like us from residents of Nine Supremes stop him? Of course we have to plan ahead. Survival is our top priority, but we all have the same thought. Hua Yunfeng coughed, and a gush of blood suddenly gushed out of his mouth. The blood was golden. It was still sticky when it came out of his mouth, but it solidified the moment it fell into Yun Yang's neck. Yun Yang had always been a clean man, so he was not worried about this change. With a quick thought, he reached out and took out a large piece of gold. It was hard and heavy, and it was definitely gold. This? Yun Yang was shocked. I was hit by the Golden Condor King's golden claw. Hua Yunfeng chuckled. The Golden Condor King is an unusual species of the demon clan. It can be said to be an outstanding flying demon. It can travel hundreds of thousands of miles in a day, and its speed is extremely fast. Its inherited cultivation method has the powerful effect of turning ordinary things into gold. Once its power lands on anything, it will be able to turn it into gold. If it lands on a person's body, even if the victim has an extraordinary physique, he will only be able to hold on for 3 days at most. At the end of the 3 days, the victim's bones and blood will all turn into gold. Yunyang was shocked. Today is the first day? The first day. Hua Yunfeng smiled faintly and said indifferently, I still have a little more than a day and a half to live. Yunyang was silent for a moment. The other 2 deacons, Hua Yunfeng smiled and said, seeing that things couldn't be done, I fled with my 2 brothers in 3 different directions to avoid the worst situation of being caught in one fell swoop. Since you fled in different directions, with Deacon Hua's ability, the Golden Condor King shouldn't have caught up with you, right? Yunyang raised his eyebrows. Hua Yunfeng was silent for a moment before he said faintly, I'm fast and have a high cultivation base. Moreover, I'm smart and flexible, especially when it comes to dealing with unexpected situations. My 2 brothers are definitely not as good as me. A look of admiration appeared on Yunyang's face. So, after Deacon Hua split up, you took the initiative to find the Golden Condor King? Hua Yunfeng laughed and said, It's not that I'm not loyal. I just left some traces to make it easier for the Golden Condor King to chase me. He gazed into the distance with a complicated expression on his face and said, The 2 of them are really stupid. I'm sure they will try their best to avenge me in the future. Yunyang, if I don't see them again, you must pass on my message to them. Please do. I hope that my brother can bring the Golden Condor King's inner core to my grave in the future. He must come and pay his respects to me while he's still alive. If his soul reaches the netherworld, I'll definitely die with everlasting regret. Hua Yunfeng said word by word. All right, I'll definitely bring it to them for you. Genius 1 second to remember this website's address. Mobile version. Chapter 1160. The wind whistled, and the clouds swept past Yunyang. Deacon Hua, you've left this place for a long time. Why are you and the people from the other sects still here? Yunyang had been puzzled by this question for a long time, but it was a question that could only be answered by the person involved. Now that Hua Yunfeng was beside him, he naturally had to get to the bottom of it. I shouldn't have mentioned this to you, but now. Hua Yunfeng sighed. Hua Yunfeng sighed and said, Apart from residents of 9 Supremes, the other few sects that still stay here are all subordinate sects that have a relationship with Sacred Heart Palace and do some things for the palace. Cough cough. After the flag battle of Mount Pentatir, they stayed here for some time to make arrangements for the next 3 years. And I'm the person in charge. We had just finished talking and were about to go our separate ways when the Golden Condor King suddenly. Hua Yunfeng let out a long sigh. After this disaster, Sacred Heart Palace's 1,000-year plan in this regard was almost destroyed. He did not say anything about the plan, and Yunyang did not ask again. There were many things that the less one knew, the better it was. Yunyang knew this very well. He knew that this matter must be a big secret that Sacred Heart Palace had been planning for many years. It was already not a good thing for him to know part of it, and if he forced himself to know more, he would only be courting death. Deacon Hua, although your injuries are serious and your symptoms are even more bizarre, if there are highly targeted treasures of heaven and earth, elixirs, such as supreme-grade things like the air of life. Yunyang said in a low voice, It's not entirely hopeless. Hua Yunfeng chuckled. The Golden Condor King's individual combat strength can only be regarded as average among the various tribes of the demon race, and his ranking is not very high. Even if he has the talent of flying and extraordinary speed, that's all. After all, when the demon race reaches a certain cultivation base, even a bear-like heavy demonic beast can fly thousands of miles in one go. Therefore, the talent of flying demonic beasts does not give him much of an advantage. But the Golden Condor King is an unusual species that almost no demon dares to provoke, except for a few very powerful demon kings, mainly because of his divine metal transformation skill. This divine art has a special attribute, and its effects are so vicious that it can be said to be unparalleled in the world. There is no cure for it. Be it the shadowless poison, formless poison, or decaying poison. Any single one of them is a monstrous creature that strikes fear in one's heart. However, as long as one has an antidote, or a treasure such as the Heaven Spirit spring water with the chi of life, they can still be cleansed and dispelled. However, this divine metal transformation technique can only be dispelled by the chi of reincarnation. Other than reincarnation chi, There's no other way to deal with it. Even the legendary heavenly Dao Qi won't be able to slow down the spread of the mortal to gold transformation, let alone the Qi of life. If this technique was used on an ordinary person, it would take 3 days. When it hit a martial artist, it would also take 3 days. In order to deal with this sinister technique, the victim must have the cultivation of a saint monarch and be immune to all evils. Otherwise, there is no solution. Therefore, this technique is the most taboo and unsolvable technique for those below the saint monarch level. Hua Yunfeng smiled bitterly and said, I'm doomed this time. Unless there's the Qi of reincarnation or a cultivator above the saint monarch level who will use all his mystical Qi to dispel the ominous metal Qi for me, I'm dead for sure. Yun Yang was moved and said, Seniors Ding and you, having a brother like Deacon Hua in this life is not a waste of your life. Yun Yang's words came from his own feelings. Hua Yunfeng clearly knew that he had a slim chance of survival, but he still acted without hesitation just to save the lives of his 2 brothers. Such brotherly loyalty was very rare in the martial world. Hua Yunfeng chuckled and said indifferently, It should be said that I'm the one who has the most advantages in this life because I have these 2 brothers. I've been poor and afraid since I was a child, so I've developed the habit of treating money as my life. I'm stingy, greedy, and love to take advantage of others. I can't bear to see others richer than me. All these years, I've even cheated and deceived my own brothers and resorted to all sorts of means. When we fight outside, we can risk our lives for each other. When my brothers are in trouble, I can also step forward bravely and do whatever I can to help them. But as long as I see some money in my brother's hands, I'll feel itchy and try to get it. Hua Yunfeng chuckled. Hua Yunfeng chuckled. My bad habit is deeply rooted in my heart. I tell myself almost every night that I can't go on like this and I must change it. But as long as someone shows off his wealth in front of me tomorrow, my eyes will still turn green with greed and I'll scheme and scheme to get it. It's the same in this battle of the celestial banners. I even got the biggest fortune in my life. Ha ha. He laughed hoarsely, but it was unknown whether he was feeling complacent or mocking himself. Yun Yang was speechless. After listening to the old man's thoughts, even though the atmosphere was heavy, he actually felt like laughing. This guy's habit is really strange. But when he thought about it more deeply, he felt a little sad. How poor was Hua Yunfeng when he was a child that he could develop such a strange habit? Ahem, I'm just afraid of being poor, so I can understand the thoughts of this kind of miser. Ahem. That's why I never write about misers and have a guilty conscience. Ding Byuk and Yu Bunning have been my brothers for a lifetime, and we're very close. But the times I've taken advantage of them are also countless. Hua Yunfeng laughed hoarsely. Even in this celestial luck banner competition, when they won my money, I was still thinking about how to renege on it. I've obviously won it back from others, but I still have the same thought. What a pity, what a pity. With my death, Pu Deshuang and the others still owe me a lot of debts. I'm afraid they won't be able to collect them, Hua Yunfeng said in a regretful tone. No, you have to bring another message to them for me. Yun Yang was speechless. Just tell them that Hua Yunfeng is dead. You can't owe a dead man money. If you still have a conscience, give his money to his family. Yun Yang sighed and did not know what to say for a moment. At this time, a frightening golden light suddenly flashed in the sky ahead. Yun Yang did not dare to be careless. With a whoosh, he descended quickly and flashed into the dense forest on the left. With a rustling sound, he was already 3,000 feet away. With a loud boom, smoke and dust rose. Looking into the distance, Yun Yang saw that the sky was already dark. There were 9 giant golden condors circling and flying in the air, blocking out the sun and the sky. These are the Golden Condor King and his 8 demon generals. Hua Yunfeng's voice was weak. I've killed 2 of his 10 demon generals. It's a pity that I didn't get their demon cores. That's a lot of money. What a pity, what a pity. Hua Yunfeng seemed to feel it was a pity. Even in such a state, he still looked at the sky with fascination and said, This is the Golden Condor King and the 8 demon generals. How much would the 9 demon cores of demon generals and above be worth? Yun Yang lowered his head and scurried away. His body was like a snake, and he tried his best to hide his body among the trees. With a swish, he was already hundreds of miles away. He resisted the urge to complain in his heart. Big brother, why are you still so greedy at a time like this? F***ck, I thought that Chen Duod's love for money had already reached the pinnacle and was unparalleled in this world. I didn't expect that this fellow in front of me would go even further. He's simply risking his life to fish for benefits. He would rather die than make money. In the sky, the Golden Condor King's sonorous voice rang out. Hua Yunfeng, I took the initiative to let you go and let you help me find my child, but you used it to kill 2 of my brothers. Even if heaven doesn't punish you, this king will never forgive you for ignoring my promise like this. This king swears to kill you. You treacherous, shameless bastard. Hua Yunfeng sighed on Yunyang's back. Listen to this King old B** starred. What the CK is he talking about? When did I see him? When did I agree to help him find his child? Now that I see that King resentful son of a B** TCH, it's like I've had his wife. It's simply inexplicable. Yunyang, who knew the truth, coughed and did not say anything. He couldn't say anything about this. Although Yunyang was thick-skinned, he still needed some dignity. If he said anything more now, it would be too unconscionable, so he really couldn't get involved. The golden light in the sky flashed again. With a long cry, the Golden Condor King's huge body shot down like a sharp arrow. Yunyang tried his best to circulate his mystical qi and quickly slipped into a cave. Then, he rushed out of the cave and fell straight down the cliff. In the face of a top-notch expert like the Golden Condor King, the so-called cave was not enough. The Golden Condor King would not even care about the chance to catch a turtle in a jar. The truth was just as Yunyang had predicted. Almost at the same time Yunyang and Hua Yunfeng fell down the cliff, the whole mountain exploded with a boom. The upper half of the mountain was completely shattered, and rubble flew into the sky. This was the vision of a truly powerful cultivator. The obstacles in the eyes of ordinary people could disappear with a wave of their hands. It was not the same as common sense. Amidst the rising dust, Yunyang and Hua Yunfeng flashed past. I've already told you the address of the Sacred Heart Palace. Hua Yunfeng's voice sounded. If it really doesn't work, you can leave me behind and escape by yourself. What we must solve now is to report to the palace about the trouble caused by the demon race's crossing of the barrier this time. They must be plotting something big by mobilizing so many people at all costs. I've already sealed all the information in a jade slip. As long as the jade slip is delivered, Yunyang remained silent, still flying in the shape of a snake. Suddenly, his body swayed and he turned from rushing forward to retreating in the opposite direction, flying 3,000 feet backward. This was because the Golden Condor King's attack had fallen on him at this moment. If Yunyang had followed his original trajectory, he would have been hit head-on. Just as the Golden Condor King's attack missed and the dust billowed into the air, Yunyang changed his direction again. He went from retreating to advancing with all his might like before, plunging into the thick cloud of dust that was so thick that he could not even see his own fingers. As soon as he entered the area covered by the dust, he quickly dove into the big hole where the Golden Condor King's attack had landed. The divine edge cut a hole with a swoosh and continued to extend, while Yunyang dived down at an astonishing speed with Hua Yunfeng on his back. Again, camouflage techniques that were suitable for ordinary people were definitely not suitable for the current situation. The effect of the dust that obscured one's vision was only for an instant, and it would also indirectly affect the target's landing point, so he had to think of a way to deal with it immediately. Yunyang's response was undoubtedly correct and timely. In the blink of an eye, the 2 of them had already disappeared thousands of feet underground. Hua Yunfeng felt a sudden chill on his body, and with a soft splash, the 2 of them had already fallen into the underground river. The underground river surged violently, lifting their bodies up and down. In the blink of an eye, they had already traveled more than 100 feet. Yunyang popped his head out of the river, his face pale as he panted heavily. Yunyang's current state was not an act. The 3 rapid transformations just now had already exhausted Yunyang's current cultivation base to its limit, and the descent of 1,000 feet was even more exhausting. If he had not experienced something similar back in Tianqian continent, Yunyang might not have been able to cope with it, even with his intelligence. Facing an expert like the Golden Condor King, a moment's difference would have cost him his life. There was no chance of survival. Hua Yunfeng smiled dryly and said with great admiration, "Sect leader Yun, your ability to escape is truly remarkable. You're the first person I've ever seen in my life." Yunyang drifted with the current and concealed his divine sense to cover an area of 30 feet around him, concealing all his and Hui Yunfeng's auras to the limit. As he drifted forward in the underground river, he said with a chuckle, "After being chased by so many people, as long as I don't die, I'll be able to master the ability to escape sooner or later. This is not something to boast about. When I was in the lower realm, I was often chased by people. I thought I wouldn't need to be chased after I came to the bound of universe, but I didn't expect that I would have to go back to my old profession. The risk just now was so great that I've never seen anything like it in my life. Now that I think about it, I still feel a lingering fear. It was really just a fluke." Hui Yunfeng laughed hoarsely. "Sect leader Yun, it's not until today that I'm truly convinced by you. Do you think your ability to escape is mediocre? You must know that in the martial world, people know how to escape. Being able to stay alive is the greatest asset. Even if you have extraordinary abilities and cultivation base, it's not impossible for you to be unlucky and never be able to reincarnate once you fall. But as long as you never die, it means that you still have a chance, a leeway, and a future." He looked at Yun Yang with a smile and said, "This is the lesson I've learned after exhausting all my life's experience. Never act recklessly because of a moment of impulse. When it's time to run, run even if you have to give up everything. Do you understand?" "I'll definitely remember Senior's teachings," said Yun Yang in a profound tone. "It's easy to remember, but it's difficult to follow it and carry it all the way to the end. It's inevitable that there will be times when it's hard for people to make a choice and they can't let go. But there will also be times when their blood is boiling." Hui Yunfeng said these earnest words in a very humorous voice, but they made Yun Yang feel a pang of sadness in his heart. Hui Yunfeng understood everything, but he still did it at the most critical moment. It was precisely this kind of understanding and doing it that was the most precious thing that human beings had sung about for thousands of years. The sound of explosions kept ringing out above their heads from an unknown distance away. It was obvious that the Golden Condor King refused to give up and was working tirelessly to find Hui Yunfeng's traces. However, the two of them were now drifting in the underground river, and it was difficult for the Golden Condor King, who was above them, to see through their movements. No matter how high his cultivation base was, he could not do anything about it. At least for the time being, Yun Yang and Hui Yunfeng were safe. But Hui Yunfeng's expression was getting more and more unsightly. Genius 1 second remember site address. Mobile version. Chapter 1161. Yun Yang, sooner or later, there will be a war for seizing the heavens between humans and the demon race. Hui Yunfeng panted. No matter what level your cultivation base has reached, you can't take it lightly. In the future, you must cultivate the experience of fighting against the demon race as soon as possible. That will be the mainstream of the war in the future, and it's also the greatest capital to save your life. Yun Yang nodded repeatedly. In all fairness, your cultivation base is already very high in the peaceful times, and it's enough to be used. Hui Yunfeng said, but now that chaos is coming, it's far from enough. You must at least advance to the level of a saint to have a basic guarantee of safety. Cultivators at the level of Saint King and Saint Venerable basically have no chance of avoiding this war, and the strength of these two levels is the level at which they are most likely to die in this war. It's not too much to say that they are cannon fodder. Hui Yunfeng looked at Yun Yang warmly. After this encounter, we will never meet again. Is there anything you don't understand about your cultivation? I want to know how big the gap between the levels is. This topic has long existed in every stage of the cultivation journey, but I want to have a clearer understanding of the strength of those who haven't reached the level yet. Yun Yang asked. This was something he had never been very clear about. You have had another opportunity in the fifth heaven this time, and your cultivation base has broken through again. Now, you should have just broken through to the fourth level of Saint King. Hui Yunfeng looked at Yun Yang carefully. What do you think is the gap between a fourth level Saint King and a third level Saint King? Yun Yang pondered for a while and said, although I'm only a beginner fourth level Saint King now and my foundation hasn't been completely stabilized, I already feel that I'm at least 4 times stronger than when I was a third level Saint King. Hui Yunfeng laughed. That's what I mean. A second level Saint King is more than twice as strong as a first level Saint King. A third level Saint King is about 3 times as strong as a second level Saint King, and a fourth level Saint King is 4 to 10 times as strong as a third level Saint King. You feel about 4 times as strong as a third level Saint King, probably because you're only a beginner. When you reach the peak, the difference in strength will be more obvious. Actually, logically speaking, if you've just broken through, you should feel that your strength is unprecedentedly strong, but the specific feeling shouldn't be this strong. It should be a matter of your innate talent that makes you much stronger than others. Generally speaking, if a 4th grade Saint King fights against a 3rd grade Saint King, if one does not use any unique techniques, he would basically be able to defeat his opponent within 3 moves. Where is the Lord? You are wrong. Between Holy Venerate and Holy King, there is another level called Holy Emperor. There is a huge gap between a Saint King and a Saint Emperor. At the level of a Saint Emperor, the difference in strength between a Saint King and a Saint Emperor is at least 10 times greater. But when one reaches the Saint Venerable level, the difference between them and a Saint Emperor is almost 100 times greater. Basically, a single finger can crush them to death. In the eyes of a Heavenly Venerable, a Heavenly Emperor is just an ant. As for the stages above Holy Exalted, the gap between each stage is even greater. Moreover, it will only be more difficult to break through each stage. As for the level of Saint Monarchs, basically, they already have an immortal body. As long as they haven't broken through to the half-saint realm, even if a 4th grade Saint Monarch were to fight against a 1st grade Saint Monarch, although it would be as easy as flipping one's hand to crush the other, a part of the Saint Monarch's true spirit would still be able to escape no matter what. In the future, they would be able to make a comeback. Hua Yunfeng smiled and said, I am currently an intermediate 2nd grade Saint Venerable, but the Golden Condor King is a peak 2nd grade Saint Venerable. It seems like we are in the same stage, but when we really fight, the gap is like heaven and earth. Do you understand? I understand, Yunyong said in a low voice. The so-called surpassing level battle can only take place in the lower stages. Perhaps it is because of the difference in the cultivator's cultivation method, or because of the ingenuity of their techniques. However, when it comes to the higher stages, the surpassing level victory is not almost impossible, it is absolutely impossible. No matter what kind of genius, what kind of special cultivation method or ingenious technique, it is difficult to reverse this rule. This is because all the cultivators who can reach the level of a Saint Venerable are God's favored ones, and each of them has their own unique skills and secret arts. It is wishful thinking to try to make up for their shortcomings with something other than cultivation base. It is true that your Residence of 9 Supremes has many genius disciples, which is enviable. It is not uncommon for someone to kill an opponent stronger than him or herself, and it is even common. But this kind of confidence does not apply to cultivators above the level of a Heavenly Emperor or a Heavenly Venerable. You must be careful to dispel this kind of confidence when the time is right. Hua Yunfeng said seriously, in the past, many geniuses died at the level of a Saint King, and 90% of the reason is because of this. Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath and said, I will remember this even more seriously. I will not slack off in the slightest. In fact, when he heard this, he had already broken out in a cold sweat. Not only his disciples, but even Yun Yang himself had been fighting opponents of a higher level in almost every battle for so many years. This kind of understanding that it was not a big deal to kill someone one level higher had long been deeply rooted in Yun Yang's heart. He was really used to it, even to the extent that it had become second nature. But, as Hua Yunfeng said, this kind of mentality must be correctly understood. If he were to blindly hold on to this mentality, he would suffer a great loss sooner or later. When it came to the battle between Heavenly Emperors and Heavenly Venerables, a moment of carelessness could lead to death, and suffering a great loss might mean leaving this world forever. With trembling hands, Hua Yunfeng took off the ring on his finger and stuffed it into Yun Yang's hand. He grasped Yun Yang's hand tightly and said, Yun Yang, send this back to the Sacred Heart Palace for my family. I will. My family. My wife died in the hands of the demon clan 2,000 years ago. Among my 5 concubines, 2 died of old age, and the other 2 died in the martial world. Of my 13 sons, 11 died in the hands of the demon clan. 1 died due to a cultivation accident, and only 1 is still alive, but he looks older than my father. I have a lot of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It can be considered a big family. With my death, the family will lose its pillar and anchor. The decline is inevitable. Ask them to move out of the Sacred Heart Palace as soon as possible and find a place to live next to it. In this way, there will be people who will often remember our past friendship, and they will owe us a favor. But if they still live in my house as a high official, others will think that they don't owe us anything at all. That will be bad for them, and it will further worsen the family's decline. When people die, they leave. When people leave, the tea cools. This is an ancient truth. Don't take chances. Hua Yunfeng smiled slightly and looked calm. As a person, never resent that the tea cools when people leave, because the tea cools when you leave first. There are many seniors who are much more powerful than you. When they leave, the tea cools and can no longer be drunk, and it might even be poisoned. There are also some high-ranking people who not only let the tea cool after they leave, but they even spilled it. If you don't want the tea to cool, you have to stay. Hua Yunfeng chuckled. I'm destined to fail, but while the tea is still warm, let them find a way to settle down as soon as possible. This is the key to the continuation of the family. Yun Yang thought for a while and said solemnly, I will bring your painstaking efforts to them. At this moment, Hua Yunfeng's face was already covered in golden light. Obviously, the corrosion of the metallographic qi was getting more and more serious. From now on, you can throw me out or put me down at any time. The Sacred Heart Palace is too far from here. It's impossible for you to outrun the Golden Condor King if you take me with you. Besides, I don't have much energy left to suppress the metallographic qi in my body, so I'm not sure if it will spread to you. Don't worry, Senior. I've already taken precautions against the spread of the metallographic qi. I just don't know what the Golden Condor King wants to do, Yun Yang asked. It's hard to say. Hua Yunfeng's face was solemn. He must have a purpose. And his plan must be huge, so we must be careful. We can't be too careful on the way to the Sacred Heart Palace this time. This area is not too far from the demon race's territory. It's no more than 15,000 miles on foot. With the Golden Condor King's speed, he can fly back in 2 hours if no saint stops him. Even if there are experts stopping him, it's impossible for the Golden Condor King to not receive him at all. He's so arrogant, so he must have a strong backup plan. That's why he's so fearless. The Sacred Heart Palace holds a battle of the Celestial Banner every 3 years. The conditions are extremely harsh, and the true meaning of this is nothing more than to select the most elite combat force to fight against the demon race in the future. You must take a long-term view. You will be the final line of defense to protect the human race in the bound of universe. In Yun Yang's deific consciousness space, Yun Yang anxiously asked Emmy, is there a way to treat this injury? Yun Yang had always valued people who valued brotherhood. He had treated the 10 court Yama kings like this in the Tianqian continent and the Demiurge Flawed 10 and the others when he came to the bound of universe. Now that he saw that Hua Yunfeng was also a person who did not hesitate to die for his brother, he could not help but have a good impression of him and wanted to save him. Ayaya. Emmy was speechless. You can't. Ayaya. Emmy looked troubled. It was very different from how it used to be when there was nothing it could not do and everything was under its control. There's a way? But is it difficult? Yun Yang's eyes lit up. He was not afraid of difficulty, but he was afraid that there was no way. As long as there was a way, it would be fine. Ayaya. Emmy's soft voice became more and more troubled. Its branches and leaves waved weakly, and its vines were twisted and shapeless. It looked very dispirited. You mean, even if you do your best to save him, you still can't cure him? Ayaya. You have a way to keep him alive? But you can't guarantee how long he can live? I can maintain the status quo and maintain his vitality? I can't move or even circulate my cultivation base after that. As long as I move my mystical qi, the metallic qi will devour my whole body and I'll die? Yun Yang's eyes suddenly turned cold. It was naturally a good thing to have a way to cure him, but as a high-level cultivator, it had almost become an instinct for him to circulate his mystical qi all the time. To abandon his cultivation base like a great cultivator like Hua Yunfeng was more difficult than killing him. Ayaya. Is it true that I can't use any mystical qi anymore? I can't use even the slightest bit of it? Yun Yang confirmed it again and again, but he could not help but hesitate, wondering if he should tell Hua Yunfeng the good news. My body is being eroded more and more by the metallic qi. The Golden Condor King's divine skill is indeed terrifying. Hua Yunfeng felt his body getting heavier and heavier. Then, he looked at his palm and found that the golden light was becoming more and more obvious. He sighed and said, I, Hua Yunfeng, didn't expect my dead body to be so valuable. F***ck, this is a real golden body. If one of my arms is cut off, I'm afraid it will be enough for the secular people to live a life without worrying about food and drink. Yun Yang's heart grew heavier and heavier. He said in a low voice, Senior Hua, I have a way to keep you alive, but... Hua Yunfeng's eyes suddenly lit up. He looked at Yun Yang and asked, What is it? I have a strange poison from the lower realm. This poison has a special property and is good at restraining the metallic qi, Yun Yang said. After you eat it, you can suppress the Golden Condor King's vicious attack and stop it from worsening. However, this poison doesn't dissolve the metallic qi, but instead forms a state of balance with it. When you survive, Senior Hua, you will never be able to use mystical qi again for the rest of your life. Hua Yunfeng's eyes lit up when he heard this. It's good that I survive. Can I remove the strange poison and the metallic qi from my body by dispersing all my cultivation base? Yun Yang shook his head and said, The balance between the poison and the metallic qi is not connected to the mystical qi of Senior's cultivation base, but to your body. In other words, Senior's cultivation base is still there, but you can't use it. Even if you use a little bit of it, you will immediately trigger a backlash and die. Hua Yunfeng's expression immediately became complicated. He was not worried that Yun Yang would deceive him because there must be a strange medicine that could save his life, but the more he thought so, the more uncomfortable he felt. A Supreme Saint expert's mystical qi was as vast as the ocean. It was fine for a while, but how could he control himself to not use any mystical qi at all times? Compared to not being able to use any mystical qi, Hua Yunfeng was not afraid of dispersing his cultivation base for a while. With his cultivation base and wealth, even if he temporarily dispersed his cultivation base, he could naturally return to his peak as long as there was a buffer period. If I can't use mystical qi at all, I'll die as soon as I use it. Isn't that worse than being a cripple? Hua Yunfeng murmured. But I can still live. As long as I live, there will be hope. Not necessarily. Although he said so, the expression on his face was incomparably complicated and ferocious. It was difficult for him to make up his mind. Let's live for the time being. After a while, Hua Yunfeng chuckled horribly. It's better to live a bad life than to die a good death. The world is vast and magical. I'm destined to die, but with the help of your miraculous medicine, even if I'm struggling at death's door, it's still worth it. Ha ha ha. All right. Having made up his mind, Yun Yang immediately communicated with Emmy in his deific consciousness space and put his plan into action. Emmy looked like it was in a dilemma, waving its tendrils unwillingly, twisting and turning. Emmy, I'll get it back for you later, Yun Yang said in a low voice. I don't want to watch such a person die. I can't let him die like this. Ah. Yeah. Emmy's leaves drooped as it stretched one of its vines to Yun Yang's hand and scratched his palm listlessly. Just a piece of vine? Emmy twisted its vines in a fit of pique. What was Emmy? It was a spiritual root that could split heaven and earth apart. Obtaining a part of Emmy was a rare opportunity. What kind of abnormality couldn't it deal with? Yun Yang was really not in the mood to comfort Emmy. He pinched off the tip of Emmy's vine, but he could clearly feel Emmy twitching violently. Yun Yang could not help feeling distressed and flustered. This seemed to be the first time Emmy had lost a limb since it was born. Then, he saw Emmy curl up. Suddenly, a few spiritual herbs around them pulled their roots out of the soil and fled in panic. Emmy let out a tender cry, causing all the spiritual herbs to stop in their tracks and tremble. Then with a swoosh, countless spiritual qi surged toward Emmy in a whistling manner. Yun Yang watched the sudden turn of events with his mouth agape. The tip of Emmy's vine that had just been pinched off was growing back at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye, but the thousands of spiritual herbs around it had withered uniformly. They looked like young wives who had been bullied, looking pitiful and aggrieved. Yun Yang was dumbstruck. Emmy's tiny vine tip actually required such a huge amount of resources? Wait, there was still a little fellow taking advantage of the situation and reaping the benefits. Gigi had been under Emmy's leaves for a long time. Now that the spiritual qi was pouring in, a portion of it was affected as well. Gigi's bald wings spread out and its head tilted. With a biubiu sound, a colorful feather popped out of its butt. A biubiu sound was heard on its head as well, a fleshy bud popping out on top of its bald head. It complemented the original fleshy bud perfectly. There had been a hair on its butt and a fleshy bud on its head. Now, there were 2 fleshy buds on its head and 2 hairs on its butt. One of them was gray while the other was colorful. Was this change a big one, or a very small one? It seemed to be very subtle. Yun Yang's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. Was there such a thing? The little fellow raised its head and lifted its butt proudly, its two hairs swaying left and right as it paced back and forth. It actually looked a little ladylike. He could not bear to look at it. With a countermeasure in hand, Yun Yang had no hesitation. He raised his hand and slapped the back of Hua Yunfeng's head. It was best to knock him unconscious before feeding him such a peculiar thing. Otherwise, he would have to explain it to him. Puff! Hua Yunfeng raised his head in confusion and looked at Yun Yang with a puzzled expression. Why did you hit me? Looking at his hand, Yun Yang was speechless. Although I did not use my full strength in this slap, even a Saint King level bear would be knocked unconscious. This fellow was clearly injured and on the verge of death. So how could he still receive this slap as if nothing had happened? So my cultivation base is still so shallow and weak? Ahem, it's nothing. Yun Yang laughed dryly and continued to go with the flow. Hua Yunfeng touched his head with a gloomy expression. The Lord's head is not something you can hit so casually. I'm really speechless. Just as he was thinking, puff! Another slap. This time, Yun Yang used a little more strength and almost went all out, so the effect was much greater than before. Hua Yunfeng's head was immediately pushed into the water by the slap. Then, he rose from the water with a splash and said furiously, You! What are you doing? Yun Yang's face was twisted. After a while he murmured, Why? Why aren't you unconscious? Why should I? I've hit you so hard. Why aren't you unconscious? You're just a mere Saint King, yet you want to knock me out? Are you stupid? Hua Yunfeng was surprised. Aren't you seriously injured and dying? Yun Yang was speechless. Even if I'm dying, as long as I'm still breathing, you can't knock me out. Hua Yunfeng looked gloomy. With your cultivation base. Yun Yang sighed. The current situation is that I can't use medicine if you don't faint. Hua Yunfeng was speechless. If you don't faint. Yun Yang racked his brains. When the medicine takes effect, it will attack the deific consciousness. I'm worried that it will turn you into an idiot. The main thing is, do you think I'm an idiot? What's the point of talking about the main thing and the secondary thing with me? Hua Yunfeng was extremely depressed. If you don't want me to see or know, I'll just close my eyes. Or I'll pass out on my own. What a lame excuse. Then you can pass out on your own. Yun Yang said sheepishly. Hua Yunfeng looked at Yun Yang speechlessly. Then he sighed and closed his eyes. After a while, his head tilted to one side and he successfully passed out. Yun Yang felt like billions of divine beasts were trampling back and forth in his stomach. Damn it. This is so King fake. In the underground river. Hua Yunfeng, who had regained consciousness, was in a much better state of mind. After all, the shackles of death had been removed, but his face was still ashen and he kept sighing. Before I took that miraculous medicine of yours, when I was in a precarious situation, I always felt that it would be better to live than to die. But now, after taking the medicine and saving my life, I feel that it would be better to just die. People are really not satisfied. Didn't you always say that as long as you're alive, there's hope and there may be a better solution in the future? Just like you mentioned before, a saint cultivator can help you get rid of the metal manifestation qi. The current situation can't be any worse than that. Hua Yunfeng smiled and was about to speak when he heard a firm voice say, That's right, but it's a pity that it doesn't apply to the two of you anymore. Deacon Hua, your life has come to an end. You're destined to have no future. Shocked, the two turned to look in the direction of the voice and saw a golden figure standing on the other side of the underground river with his hands behind his back. His eyes locked on them. The Golden Condor King. The Golden Condor King had actually found this place. Genius 1 second to remember this site's address. Mobile version. Chapter 1162. Yun Yang's heart sank abruptly. He had been too careless. He had been too careless. Escaping from the underground river was the best way to deal with the situation, and make it difficult for the enemy to track him down. But when he thought about it carefully, he realized that there would always be traces of him falling into the underground river. How could the Golden Condor King not have found it? With the Golden Condor King's cultivation base and strength, he could have followed the underground river since he had discovered it. He should have given up following the current the moment he fell into the underground river, and turned to go against the current to escape from it. That would have been the safest plan. How could he have been caught up like this? Was he left with no choice but to face him head-on? Hua Yunfeng was silent for a moment before he suddenly smiled. Perhaps my previous path is indeed destined to be cut off, but I still have to thank God for giving me the opportunity to repay you. Let's see if my last attack can surprise you enough. Yunyang, I'll leave it to you in the future. After saying that, he took a step forward and took a deep breath. Facing the Golden Condor King, he smiled faintly and said, Golden Condor King, accompany me on my way here today. It was obvious that he was going to launch his mystical Qi one last time, or even self-destruct to fight for a chance for Yunyang to escape. With Hua Yunfeng's cultivation base, Yunyang's chances of escaping were very high if he went to extremes. Yunyang thought quickly and shouted in a low voice, Senior, please wait. We may still have a chance. He then turned to the Golden Condor King and said, Golden Condor King, it's really beyond my expectation that you could find this place. It shows your wisdom. But, have you really lost your child? The Golden Condor King immediately recognized the voice and grinned hideously. So you're the one who pretended to be Hua Yunfeng to help me find my child. The heavens really didn't let me down and let me get rid of two people I must eliminate at once. Hua Yunfeng turned to look at Yunyang in confusion. What's going on? I don't understand. What impersonation? Who's impersonating me? It doesn't matter who I am and who is Hua Yunfeng. At least, it doesn't matter to you, does it? Yunyang said faintly. The Golden Condor King nodded slowly. That's right. It's indeed not important. What I care about now is that no matter who you are and whether you are Hua Yunfeng or not, you're destined to die. Don't you want your child anymore? Yunyang said in a low voice. Or perhaps, your so-called search for the child was just a pretense from the beginning? The Golden Condor King laughed sinisterly. These are not things that a person like you, who is destined to die, should worry about. What you should be thinking about right now is how you're going to walk the path of the underworld. Yunyang laughed. You want to kill me? You dare to kill me? Can you kill me? The Golden Condor King looked at Yunyang mockingly after hearing the barrage of questions. Shouldn't I kill you? Why wouldn't I dare to kill you? Do you think I will give you the time to cast a protective array formation? There's no harm in telling you the truth. Even if you were to cast the array formation from the last time, this king will continue attacking. Let's see how long you can last. Yunyang smiled faintly. When he opened his palm, a purple jade flute appeared in his hand. The jade flute's entire body was smooth and glossy, giving off an indescribable sense of elegance. There was a small pendant at the end of the jade flute. The pendant was shaped like a small house, swinging in the air. It was small and exquisite, but it looked magnificent. Yunyang took out the purple jade flute, but he sighed inwardly. The current situation was already very bad. He could only use this last life-saving method to deal with the current situation, which was to summon the residence of 9 Supremes and hide in it with Hua Yunfeng. Only then could he ensure his safety. Apart from this, there was no other way to deal with the current crisis. Yunyang was absolutely unwilling to use this method, because this was his final and greatest trump card. If Hua Yunfeng was not by his side, Yunyang would rather choose to launch his manifestation powers. As long as he could find an opening, the Golden Condor King would never be able to take him down no matter how fast he was. However, with Hua Yunfeng around, this method was doomed to fail. Just as he was about to summon the residence of 9 Supremes to the bound of universe, he was shocked to see the purple jade flute suddenly emit a faint purple light. This faint purple light suddenly appeared in the dark underground, but the entire underground river was illuminated by this faint light, as if it was covered with a layer of dreamy luster. Then, as if it had a life of its own, the purple jade flute flew up from Yunyang's hand and hovered quietly in the air. The purple light shone on the Golden Condor King's face. The Golden Condor King narrowed his eyes. The faint purple light suddenly made his eyes extremely uncomfortable, and tears streamed down his cheeks. Hua Yunfeng was shocked. Looking at the purple jade flute, he had no idea what was going on. Yunyang was at a loss as well, but then, his gaze turned into surprise. Looking at the purple light, he actually felt like crying. In the purple light, a leisurely voice said, "So, it's a golden condor." As soon as the voice rang out, all the water in the underground river stopped flowing. Not only did the underground river stop flowing, but all the spiritual chi in the air also stopped flowing at the same time. No, it was as if the entire heaven and earth had stopped moving at this moment. At the same time, the Golden Condor King's face was filled with horror, for he keenly felt that he could not move his body at all. He could not even move his fingers or blink his eyes. Horrified, he tried his best to circulate his cultivation method and mobilize his physical strength, wanting to regain control of his body and return to his original form so that he could fly away at top speed. However, it was a pity that nothing was old. He couldn't even activate a single drop of inner energy, let alone anything else. He could only stand motionlessly on the spot. The moment he thought of this, he was so scared that he lost his ability to think. He clearly did not feel any aura, so why couldn't he move? Moreover, his eyes kept tearing up, and he could not stop them. The elegant voice said slowly, "Little Golden Condor is quite fierce." The voice was elegant and graceful, and there was a hint of a smile in it. However, the Golden Condor King was scared out of his wits at this moment. If he could move, he would have been trembling like an old sow. A ray of light flashed, and a hand slowly reached out from the light. The fingers of the hand were slender, fair, and delicate, like the fingers of a pampered lady. The sleeves that appeared were moon-white in color, and the texture was extraordinarily soft, as if they could melt in the air at any time. With a light wave of the hand, the Golden Condor King's stiff body was sent flying. Plop, plop, plop. He had actually used his body to pierce through the mountain rock that was thousands of feet high, directly breaking through the entire mountain and flying to who knew how far away. Yun Yang and Hua Yunfeng were overjoyed to see this. The voice said faintly, "Come back." The next moment, the Golden Condor King's skeletal body reappeared in its original spot. It was still standing proudly with its hands clasped behind its back, but its eyes were filled with a pleading expression. It was as if it had died. The Golden Condor King felt that his body had regained the ability to move, and a myriad of pain assaulted him at the same time. However, he did not even dare to make a sound, much less move. With the other party's terrifying might that was capable of completely restraining him, and even confining the three realms as soon as he appeared, acting rashly would be courting death. Moreover, the technique he used to summon him back through space was definitely a technique of the mythical realm, and it wasn't even that exaggerated. The leisurely voice said faintly, "Kneel here. Kneel for 3 days and 3 nights." The Golden Condor King dared not hesitate at all. He knelt down with his back straight. He did not dare to not kneel, and he did not even dare to hesitate for a moment. Demonic beasts were the most realistic creatures. They had an instinctive reverence for living beings that were stronger than them, and the Golden Condor King knew very well what kind of person he had encountered. The person in front of him had not even revealed his aura, and his true body was unknown even from tens of thousands of miles away. Just a slight movement of his divine sense was enough to cause such power. In the Golden Condor King's impression, even the supreme demon emperor of the demon race did not have such strength. In the face of such an existence, the Golden Condor King did not have the slightest intention to resist. The other party did not even need to make a move. With just a thought, he could kill the Golden Condor King thousands of times. The hand slowly retracted into the light, and then the light disappeared as if it had never existed. It was not until the light completely disappeared that the sound of rushing water could be heard again, and the aura of the stopped space resumed its flow. Yun Yang and the others were shocked as they stared at the underground river. What had happened just now was still the same. It was not that the flow had become bigger after it stopped freezing, but that there was no change at all. What did this mean? What had been frozen just now was not caused by the extreme cold, but had directly frozen space, or perhaps even frozen time itself. The purple jade flute slowly descended from the air and landed in Yun Yang's hand. The Golden Condor King was still kneeling on the shore, not daring to move a muscle. He watched Yun Yang and Hua Yunfeng float down the river with the whites of his eyes. His body had regained its full mobility, but he still did not dare to move a muscle as he watched the two leave. Beads of sweat rolled down his face, and his heart was filled with lingering fear. That voice had said that he would kneel for 3 days and 3 nights. The Golden Condor King didn't dare take any chances at this time. After this incident, the Golden Condor King was likely to fall ill. As long as he saw the beautiful girlish Lao AI again, he would most likely be instinctively terrified, scared out of his wits, and lose all will to fight. The Golden Condor King was not the only one who was absent-minded. Yun Yang's mind was also blank. Even after going downstream for a long time, he still could not think of anything. He was still dazed and speechless for a long time. Hua Yunfeng's condition was not much better, and he was even worse than Yun Yang's. His face had turned as white as snow, and he whispered in shock. "Sect leader Yun, is this your master?" As he spoke, he wore an expression of extreme reverence and shock. Even Hua Yunfeng couldn't imagine how high the cultivation base of the person who spoke was. Hua Yunfeng knew that Yun Yang had a master with a mysterious background and extraordinary cultivation base, but he could not imagine who this person was and what level this cultivator was at to possess such terrifying strength. Even the Lord of Sacred Heart Palace did not have such strength. Although the Lord of Sacred Heart Palace's strength was also unfathomable and beyond Hua Yunfeng's knowledge, he was still in the realm of legend, and there were still traces to be found. However, that Lao AI just now, that moment of grace, was truly unearthly and unimaginable. It was truly a divine creation. Yun Yang was still in a daze. After a long while he asked, "What?" Hua Yunfeng asked again, "This is..." Yun Yang came back to his senses and sighed softly. "Yes, that's my master, but this is also the first time I've seen my master in action. Alas, compared to him, I'm really far from being able to compare," Hua Yunfeng said respectfully. "It's not just far from being able to compare, it's not even comparable, okay? He's clearly a deity-like figure." "No, I should say that he's a deity. Sect leader Yun, it's really your good fortune to have such a master." When the two of them got out of the underground river and went to the boundless mountains, Yun Yang had already returned to normal, but Hua Yunfeng was still in shock. Even the gaze he used to look at Yun Yang was filled with awe and admiration. Based on his experience, Hua Yunfeng guessed that the person who made the sound was Yun Yang's master, and his cultivation base was so high that he had never seen it before. Even the Lord of Sacred Heart Palace and the experts of the Eastern Celestial Palace were far inferior to Yun Yang's master. In fact, there was no comparison at all. The highest level that Hua Yunfeng knew was the so-called Saint Realm, which was the highest level in this world. Based on Hua Yunfeng's knowledge, it seemed that Yun Yang's master was at least at that level, or even higher. Yun Yang was also very silent along the way. He had been thinking about one thing. Is the person who made the sound my father? It should be, right? On the way to Sacred Heart Palace, there were no more unforeseen events. It was not until 5 days later when he arrived at the gates of the Sacred Heart Palace that he received a shocking piece of news. One day ago, the Golden Condor King had, for some unknown reason, revealed his true form and fled at top speed. He was as anxious as a stray dog and as panicky as a fish that had escaped the net. A journey of 108,000 miles would normally take a day to cover, but this time, the Golden Condor King had rushed with all his might and returned in less than half a day. He did not even care about the 8 demon generals under his command. This action had directly caused the 8 demon generals to be besieged and attacked by the experts of Sacred Heart Palace, and as many as 5 of them had fallen. The Golden Condor King's posture of fleeing, the kind of eagerness to unleash all his life potential and consume half of his life, puzzled everyone. But no one was chasing after him. Why was he running? Genius 1 second to remember website. Mobile version. Chapter 1163. In the Sacred Heart Palace. Yun Yang looked at the mountain range, a sense of awe rising within him. Previously, when he looked at it from the outside, he only saw a few pavilions and pavilions that occupied an area of at most a few acres. However, after entering, he realized that this place was at least a few thousand miles wide. There were mountains and valleys that stretched on endlessly. Clouds and mist floated back and forth. It was like a paradise on earth. The spiritual qi here was so rich that even Yun Yang felt suffocated. From time to time, a dense mass of spiritual qi would rush over and drizzle spiritual liquid over his head. Wherever he breathed, he could smell the spiritual qi that could make his cultivation base advance by leaps and bounds. Heaven and earth treasures were everywhere he looked, and auspicious clouds surrounded him. He could hear the sound of pines rustling and the wind whistling. The Sacred Heart Palace is really a good place. Hearing that Hua Yunfeng had returned, Ding Byuk and Yu Bunning came out to greet him with surprise on their faces. They were so excited that they almost fainted. They hugged Hui Yunfeng with tears on their faces, crying, laughing, shouting and screaming. The saint-venerable state they had cultivated for many years was gone at this moment. Pu Deshuang and the others also hurried out. The moment he saw Hui Yunfeng, Pu Deshuang's face was full of surprise, but he cursed, "I knew this scourge was not dead. This old B***starred. A scourge that lives for thousands of years. Why didn't you just F***king die outside? Bastard. Then I don't have to pay my debt." The other two attendants shook their heads angrily and said, "I'm so disappointed. I'm so disappointed." Hui Yunfeng laughed and said, "You want me dead? Are you blind? Let me tell you, there's no way you can go back on your word. I knew you were going to go back on your word, so I didn't die anyway." Ha ha ha. Everyone laughed, not taking it seriously at all. Then, they stepped forward and thanked him for escorting Hui Yunfeng back. 5 or 6 attendants enthusiastically accompanied Yun Yang to the place where he stayed. Then, they called their friends and began to hold a banquet. All kinds of spiritual fruits and wine were brought out like flowing water. Hui Yunfeng, on the other hand, went straight to the hall of the temple master. "How was it?" Pu Deshuang looked at Yun Yang and asked with a smile. "It was very dangerous along the way, wasn't it? It said that the Golden Condor King personally came out to kill you. Us brothers were so anxious that the temple master immediately sent 200 people to meet you. But they only managed to kill a few golden condors. How did you come back? Didn't you meet the Golden Condor King?" Yun Yang cursed inwardly. "What do you mean by hunting us? I'm clearly going to hunt Hui Yunfeng of the Golden Condor? It's a rare for me to be a good person, but I wasted a lot of effort." F***CK. If you only wanted to hunt me down, I would have long since used my various manifestations to escape. As for exposing my ultimate trump card, the purple jade flute, I even had to hint to that old man Hui Yunfeng to keep it a secret. It's rare for me to be a good person, but I wasted so much effort. Yun Yang's mind was racing, but his expression was neither servile nor overbearing. He recounted his encounters along the way in detail. When he told them that Hui Yunfeng had been struck by the Golden Condor King's mortal-to-metal technique and that he had used fight poison with poison to cure Hui Yunfeng, they all looked dejected when he told them that Hui Yunfeng could no longer use mystical qi after being struck by the Golden Condor King's mortal-to-metal technique and that he had cast fight poison with poison treatment on him. Each of them had the cultivation base of a supreme saint, so they naturally knew what it meant for a cultivator of the same level to be unable to use mystical qi for the rest of his life. After that, he would become an existence even worse than a cripple. Hui Yunfeng only hurried over when he was half drunk. He wanted to get drunk and vent the frustration that had accumulated in the past few days. "The temple master has appointed me as the deputy supervisor of the Sacred Heart Palace's internal affairs. From now on, the martial world has nothing to do with me anymore." Hui Yunfeng's voice was filled with an indescribable sense of loss. Ding Byuk and Yu Bunning sat silently on the side, not knowing what to say. Yun Yang was also silent for a long time. After getting out of danger, Yun Yang had asked Emmy about Hui Yunfeng's physical condition in detail, especially whether there was a possibility of curing him, but Emmy's answer was mixed. Emmy told Yun Yang that there were at least 3 effective methods to eliminate the hidden metal qi in Hui Yunfeng's body, but none of them could be done in a short time. The first one was that if Emmy could improve itself and its instinctive power to a higher level, then it could give Hui Yunfeng some spirit sprout to completely eliminate the abnormality in his body. However, Emmy's upgrade had always been a big problem, and it could not be achieved without great opportunities. It was beyond Yun Yang's control, so it was a classic example of an unattainable goal. Secondly, if Yun Yang could make another breakthrough in his endless divine art, he was confident that he could eliminate the negative situation completely. Although Yun Yang had reached the peak of the 5th stage of the endless divine art for a long time, he still needed a lot of karma qi to advance. It was not something that could be gathered in a short time. As for the third one, it was one of Yun Yang's manifestation powers that he had not used for a long time, the metal elemental art. That was the cultivation method that belonged to Yun Yang's second brother, the 9 Supreme's Golden Supreme Gu Jiu. After Yun Yang had gathered all the manifestations of the 9 Supreme's divine arts, he should have been an expert in the art of metal. However, he was adept at manipulating wind, cloud, water, fire, thunder, blood, and earth. Only wood and metal were the two elements that he was the most inexperienced in, and he would stop after just a little taste. Because of Emmy, all plants in the world could be controlled by the former, so Yun-Yang did not need to worry about it at all. As for the latter, Yun-Yang had better methods to refine rare metals and fight enemies, so these two powers were rarely used. Therefore, Yun-Yang's understanding of the metal elemental art was only at the level of unparalleled sharpness and impregnable defense, which was also the most commonly used method to fight enemies when Golden Supreme Gujiu was charging and breaking through enemy lines in the past. Emmy pointed out directly. If Yun-Yang had the same level of attainment in the metal elemental art as wind and cloud divine art, he could definitely eliminate the Golden Condor King's metal elemental chi easily, and even integrate it for his own use. However, with Yun-Yang's current attainment and knowledge in the metal elemental art, the gap was almost incalculable and he could not do anything about it. He knew that there were many ways to cure the Golden Condor King, but they were all within reach. How could Yun-Yang be in a good mood? Right, the Temple Master asked me to tell you that he will meet you in the afternoon. Hua Yunfeng looked at Yun-Yang and said with a smile, I didn't mention the underground river. His words were somewhat meaningful, but Yun-Yang understood the meaning immediately. However, what kind of person was Yun-Yang? Naturally, he understood the deeper meaning behind it. Thank you, Big Brother Hua. Escorted by the stewards, they arrived at Hua Yunfeng's house. It was a large house that occupied an area of 30 to 40 acres, but the furnishings inside were extremely simple and even a little shabby. At least, it did not match Hua Yunfeng's identity as a supreme saint expert. This situation also made everyone present furious. Hua Yunfeng, you miser. King won so much money from me, but where did you spend it? That's right. King cheat us of our money every day. Look at how poor your house is. Where's the money? Hua Yunfeng, where's my money? Where's the money? Hua Yunfeng snorted with a cold face, completely ignoring the clamoring of the people in front of him. Yun-Yang, on the other hand, could not help but be dumbfounded for a long time. Although he knew a little about Hua Yunfeng's money-grubbing nature, among the 20 or so stewards who came here, none of them had ever cheated money from Hua Yunfeng. This seemed a little extreme. Think carefully, all of you. From now on, this old man will be in charge of internal affairs. Hua Yunfeng rolled his eyes and said, a considerable part of your household expenses will come from this old man's hands. Such blatant hints caused everyone to be dumbfounded. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and give me gifts to please me. Steward Hua began to ask for bribes. Especially those who owe me money, hurry up and send me the final sum. If you dare to delay, don't count on your family's expenses for thousands of years. Weigh the pros and cons. He cast a sidelong glance at Pu Deshuang and the others, full of provocation and provocation. Pu Deshuang jumped up, clenched his teeth, grabbed his neck, and shook him hard. You don't have any mystical chi or cultivation base, yet you still dare to threaten us? Be careful. I'll beat you 18 times a day. Have you forgotten that the mystical yellow iron says that the bigger the fist, the bigger the reason? I don't have any cultivation base now, so of course I have to focus on making money. You beat me 18 times a day. Kill me directly if you can. Not to mention 18 times, even if you beat me 18,000 times. You can't owe me a single cent less. Hua Yunfeng's eyes rolled back as he was strangled, but he still could not be subdued by force and could not be corrupted by cultivation base. Yun-Yang's eyes were filled with admiration as he watched the group of servants fooling around. There was even envy in his eyes. This group of deacons had been together for thousands of years, and they were already as close as brothers. Perhaps each of them had some small flaws, such as greed, lust, or something else. But no matter what their flaws were, they had all been tolerated after being together for thousands of years. Although they quarreled and quarreled every day, the brotherhood between them had long been as strong as gold and stone and could not be shaken. At the thought of this, Yun-Yang could not help but think of his brothers, whose whereabouts were unknown now. Wasn't the relationship between the 9 Supremes like this? It was a pity that the time the 9 Supremes spent together was too little, too little. Everyone was winking at Yun-Yang when he was going to see the Temple Master in the afternoon. Our Temple Master likes young talents the most. Sect Leader Yun, you only need to show your true colors, which are neither servile nor overbearing. Don't flatter him deliberately. Our Temple Master is a donkey. The more you flatter him, the angrier he will be. Yes, yes, yes. Just act as you usually do. Don't be too concerned about being pretentious. Our temple master is actually a little silly. Everyone gave Yun Yang face-to-face advice. Their harsh words were far beyond Yun Yang's expectation, and he did not know whether to laugh or cry. Is it really okay for you to talk about your temple master behind his back like this? Is it really okay? In the afternoon. Led by Pu Deshuang, Yun Yang entered the core hall of the Sacred Heart Palace, the Heavenly Heart Palace. There were only 2 guards at the entrance of the hall. When he entered, there was only a room the size of an ordinary house inside, and there were already 5 people seated inside. As Yun Yang entered, the 5 of them looked up at the same time. Sitting at the head of the table was a burly bearded man with round eyes and a leopard's head. Although he was sitting, Yun Yang estimated that he should be at least 9 feet tall if he stood up. If it was just his physical body weight, it would probably be no less than 300 catties. What a burly man! His physique was extremely strong. A thick black robe was draped over his body, but the front was unbuttoned, revealing a thick patch of chest hair. Seeing Yun Yang enter, he actually laughed with his long legs stretched out and waved his hand, saying, "You must be the leader of the residents of 9 Supremes, Yun Yang? I am Zhan Wufei. Come, 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 come. Don't be shy, don't stand on ceremony, don't stand on ceremony." For a moment, Yun Yang felt like his brain had short-circuited. To be honest, before this, Yun Yang had fantasized countless times about how the Lord of the Sacred Heart Palace, the legendary saint-level expert, Zhan Wufei, would look like. However, no matter how much he thought about it, looking at all his imaginations and fantasies, he had never thought that Zhan Wufei would actually look like this. If this fellow were to walk out, Yun Yang would only think that he was a bandit if others did not mention his identity. He was filled with the aura of a bandit from head to toe, and he did not hide it at all. The demeanor of an expert, the temperament of a senior, the dignity of a pinnacle expert. None of it was there. Not even a drop of it was there. The 4 people on both sides of the leader were also friendly, very refined and elegant. At least, in Yun Yang's understanding, this was what a Lord of the Sacred Heart Palace should look like. However, only this Lord of the Sacred Heart Palace did not match the demeanor that a Lord of the Sacred Heart Palace should have in Yun Yang's mind. Yun Yang wanted to say something, but he could not think of the right words at that moment. He choked and was speechless for a long time. He had wanted to compliment the Lord with a few polite words like, "I've long heard of the Lord's great name, and now that I've seen you today, you're indeed an immortal, and you live up to your reputation." However, he could not bring himself to say such words now. If he were to say such words to this fellow, Yun Yang's guilty conscience was secondary. He was even more afraid that the other party would think that he was mocking him. "This is the Assistant Lord, Chun Ruoshui. This is the Assistant Lord Meng Chongfei. This is the Assistant Lord, Tian Wuming, and this is the Great Elder, Lei Qianli." Zhan Wufei introduced them casually. "You're all not outsiders, sit, sit." He glared at him. "Why aren't you sitting?" Yun Yang smiled bitterly and plopped himself down on the chair, a strange feeling surging within him, lasting for a long time. Really? His worldview was ruined. "May I ask who your master is, sect leader Yun? Is it convenient for you to reveal it?" Zhan Wufei smiled. It would have been better if he had not smiled, for there was a tinge of ferocity to it. As he smiled, the curly beard on his face trembled, like a lion grinning. His words were straight to the point. The Sacred Heart Palace and most of the sects with celestial luck banners would be very interested in Yun Yang's background. This would affect their attitude towards Yun Yang and the residents of 9 Supremes in the future. "There's nothing that I can't say about my master. But forgive me for being blunt, I don't even know what my master's name is or what his title is." Yun Yang smiled bitterly. The old man has never mentioned it. Looks like he's also an eccentric old thing. Zhan Wufei was not bothered at all and said, "Old things nowadays are all eccentric, and they do things in secret. They're not at all straightforward. They're not as straightforward as they used to be when they roamed the martial world, holding their breath." The other 4 looked up into the sky, looking left and right. Regarding the Lord's daily mockery, they treated it as a gust of wind blowing past their ears. There was no point in pursuing it, and it would only make them more annoyed. "Sect leader Yun, what do you think?" Zhan Wufei would not let Yun Yang off the hook, asking with a glare. "What do I think? Yun Yang was stunned. It did not seem like it was his place to express his opinion. After some thought he said, "Actually, I think that this situation is very, very, very normal. The old seniors have roamed the martial world for thousands of years. They've seen all kinds of storms and seen all kinds of worldly affairs. They're already used to the mundane world. How can they not be tired of it? Now that they want to conceal their strength and bide their time, they want to live a few days of peace. While they're in seclusion, when they see someone or something that's tempting enough, they'll be overjoyed. It's only human nature to be eccentric when you think about it." He thought about it and said, "At least, it's not a good thing right now, but it's not necessarily a bad thing either. Let's see how many people can end their lives of seclusion and step forward when there's a big mess in the future. That's the key. I wonder if Senior thinks so." Zhang Wufei slapped his thigh and said, F***CK. You're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head. It's a personal choice for those old fellows to live in seclusion. It's understandable during times of peace and has nothing to do with the grand scheme of things. However, we humans in the demon race will have a war sooner or later. Unfortunately, we humans can't enter the core of the demon race's territory, but those bastards from the demon race can enter our territory and stir up trouble. There's been more and more friction in recent years, but those old fellows are nowhere to be seen. Once the war breaks out, it'll be terrible if those old bastards get used to living in peace and don't come out. Yun Yang laughed and said, "I'm not as pessimistic as you, Palace Lord. I think when the war between the two races comes, those who step forward will definitely be much more than those who live in seclusion." "Palace Lord, you're thinking too much. The human heart is something that everyone has." Zhang Wufei laughed and said, "Yun Yang, you're a good thing, and your heart is even better. I quite like your temper." Yun Yang lowered his head, exasperated. "I'm a good thing? May I ask what kind of good thing am I? Do you know what my heart is like? I don't even know myself, all right? There's still someone who talks like this. He must be drunk. How did such a person become the Palace Lord of the Sacred Heart Palace?" Chapter 1164. I mean, you have a good heart. You're a good man. Good young man. Ha ha. Zhang Wufei had obviously realized his slip of the tongue and was actually laughing at his own slip of the tongue. He laughed and said, "I must thank you for saving the people of the Sacred Heart Palace. They said that I have to reward you with something to show that we, the Sacred Heart Palace, know how to be grateful and repay kindness with kindness. Tell me, what should I reward you with?" The 3 deputy hallmasters and a grand elder covered their faces. It was already good enough that a young man dared to sit down in front of you and speak freely, but you actually wanted him to tell you what to reward him. Who would have the nerve to say it? If they did not know their lord well, the 3 deputy leaders would definitely think that their lord was stingy and was trying to bluff his way out of the situation. However, they had thought too much. Perhaps others were too embarrassed to say it, but Yun Yang had the nerve to say it and ask for it. "You've said that I'm a good man. Why am I too embarrassed to say it?" Yun Yang had more or less guessed the Palace Lord's temper the moment they met. He only mused for a moment before speaking. "Palace Lord, you're a straightforward man, so I'll cut to the chase. Regarding rewards and whatnot, I think, from my point of view, it's naturally about what's best. The more the merrier. Of course, it's up to the Palace Lord to decide. The Palace Lord's vast knowledge isn't something a junior like me can compare to." Cough, am I right? Zhang Wufei was stunned when he heard this. This fellow is really rude. Even using words to mock me. Is he a good man? What kind of good man is he? The 3 deputy leaders and a great elder looked up as well, looking at Yun Yang as if they were looking at a deity. How strange. This fellow is really bold. It's been a long time since I've seen a young man like this. The Lord looks straightforward in his actions. Cough, he's also straightforward. However, he has dealt with many people in the past in such a manner, saving him a lot of follow-up. "Tell me, what do you want?" "I'll give you whatever you want." Usually, most people would reply, "It's only a small effort, I don't want anything." Therefore, a certain someone went with the flow and really didn't give anything. But now, a weirdo had appeared in front of him. You told him to ask for it himself, and he gave it to you just because he wanted it. In the end, the first thing he said was the best. And the more the better. This time, he had been tricked by himself. Zhang Wufei grinned and said, Good, good, I like this straightforward temper. How about this? I will give you 3 types of rewards. You can choose one of them. If you choose it, you can just take it away. Ha! The second trick of the temple master had arrived. Yun Yang was all smiles as he said, "May I ask which 3? Does the hall master have any recommendations?" Zhan Wufei said straightforwardly, "Yes, I do. Personally, I recommend you to choose the first option. 200 Supreme Grade Spirit Jades. Do you know what Supreme Grade Spirit Jades are? That's a top-notch divine item for cultivation. It's a peerless treasure that can never be found in the outside world. It's rare even in the Sacred Heart Palace. I liked you the moment I saw you. I made the decision to give you 200 pieces of top-grade spiritual jades." Supreme Grade Spiritual Jades were high-end controlled items in the Sacred Heart Palace. They really did not exist in the outside world. Because of this, they had artificially created a situation where there was a demand for them but no supply. They could be said to be priceless treasures, and 200 pieces at that. Not only were they generous, but they were also very sincere. However, from Yun Yang's point of view, it seemed that the Sacred Heart Palace had done this on purpose. They had deliberately strictly controlled the supreme grade spiritual jades, causing the prices to be inflated. Although the reason was unclear, the truth was very clear. The true value and effect of the supreme grade spiritual jades were actually inferior to the ethereal amethyst, which meant that they were more precious than the ethereal amethyst in the outside world. On the way back, Yun Yang had heard Hua Yunfeng mention that he had gambled thousands of supreme-grade spiritual jades. Therefore, at least from Yun Yang's point of view, the value of the supreme-grade spiritual jades was just that. The so-called peerless and top-notch rarity was all hyped up by the Sacred Heart Palace. Humph. How could I, Yun Yang, be fooled by this? Yun Yang's expression did not change as he said, "On the way back, Senior Hua Yunfeng gave me some supreme-grade spiritual jades. Such rare items are enough for me to use for a long time with my meager strength. Now that we are at the front line of the final war between the human race and the demon race, I'd better keep such top-notch strategic resources as backup. I won't be greedy. Please tell me the second option, Temple Lord." Hua Yunfeng had gained a lot from the bet in the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner, so he was very generous to Yun Yang, his savior. He directly gave him 500 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jades, further lowering Yun Yang's demand for them. How could the 200 pieces that Zhan Wufei gave him move Yun Yang's heart? Zhan Wufei glanced at Yun Yang in surprise and said in a deep voice, "The second option is an inherited cultivation method of the Sacred Heart Palace, called the Great Divine Skill. Practicing this cultivation method is not only pure but also one of the few elite cultivation methods known in the bound of universe that can lead straight to the saint level." The second option was so generous that it was definitely much more than the 200 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jades offered by the first option. The saint level was the peak of the bound of universe's cultivators, so it was not difficult to imagine how rare cultivation methods that could lead straight to the saint level were in this world. Yet, Zhan Wufei had given Yun Yang a peerless cultivation method, which was truly generous. Yun Yang coughed and said, I feel that cultivating this cultivation method is going smoothly and my progress is not yet complete, so I don't want to change my path for the time being. May I ask what the third option is?" That person's honey was his poison. The endless divine art that Yun Yang cultivated and the various manifestation cultivation methods were all capable of reaching the starry sky, regardless of their realms. How could a mere cultivation method that could reach the level of a saint enter Yun Yang's eyes? Zhan Wufei said, "The third option is a spiritual herb, a amethyst peony. This spiritual herb is an exotic spiritual root, so its effects are extremely strong." Yun Yang looked slightly disappointed as he nodded and said, "Oh, I'll take this amethyst peony then." Zhan Wufei had not had time to introduce the specific effects of the amethyst peony, but Yun Yang had already chosen it. He could not help but be dumbfounded. Puffed, cough, cough. The 3 deputy lords and a great elder lowered their heads abruptly, almost spitting out uncontrollably. The Lord's expression was just too strange. Zhan Wufei laughed amiably and said, "Leader Yun, are you not going to reconsider? If you're not satisfied, we can still discuss it further." "Not at all, not at all. I'm very satisfied with the third option," Yun Yang said confidently. "I've always liked spiritual roots and spiritual herbs. I'm very interested in any kind of spiritual herb. Although this is the first time I've heard of this amethyst peony, and I've never seen it before, to me, The joy of watching a spiritual herb grow is already wonderful. The corners of Zhang Wufei's lips twitched subconsciously, deeply feeling that this fellow was really different from the others. Perhaps he was too different. He actually felt that he could not tell if this fellow was really honest or just pretentious. He looked like he had no choice but to pick, but he had chosen the most valuable option out of the three. The amethyst peony. Not many people had heard of the amethyst peony, but it did not mean that it was mediocre. It had another name that was well known to all. The soul-refining flower. The soul-refining flower was an exquisite spiritual herb of the bound of universe. Only top-notch cultivators could use it, because it only had one effect. The soul would be eternally solidified after consumption. This effect was too high-end for low-level cultivators, far beyond their reach. Even if they knew about it, it was basically useless. However, for high-level cultivators, it was like having a second life. The so-called eternally solidified soul meant that even if the physical body of the user was destroyed, the soul could still live eternally in this world and not fall into the cycle of reincarnation. What's more, even if the soul was burned by a saint's fire of tempering, it would not cause too much damage to the soul. Even if the soul was shattered into pieces and scattered across the world, the soul could still gather again with the passage of time and slowly take shape. Consuming the soul-refining flower was equivalent to having an immortal body. In such a state, it was even more successful when used for possession and rebirth. Not only would there not be a situation where the soul could not fuse, but it could also wash away the original soul in the body of the possessor, preserving all the soul energy in the possessor's body. From then on, there would be no obstacles and it would be smooth sailing on the path of cultivation. In the entire bound of universe, there was only one spiritual herb that could solidify the soul. Legend had it that there was no such spiritual herb in this world. Instead, it was an almighty being who felt that his best friend had fallen and could not be resurrected. After ascending to the top, he preached to the starry sky and created this spiritual herb out of thin air. He scattered it in the bound of universe so that if his descendants obtained it, they would not have to experience the same tragedy that Zhang Wufei had gone through. The Sacred Heart Palace only had two such dream divine grade plants. As the palace lord, Zhang Wufei had always treated it like a treasure. Someone did not want the treasure to be covered in dust, so he would take it out from time to time to show off. Therefore, every time something like this happened, he would always take it out and display it under a different name. Those who received the reward would all choose one of the other rewards without exception. They would never pick a spiritual herb that they did not know what it was used for and whose name was not even known, and miss out on the opportunity just like that. Of course, they would not know that Zhang Wufei would be secretly pleased for a long time because of this. To put it simply, this was Zhang Wufei's bad taste. He had placed the most precious thing in front of him, which was equivalent to giving him a great opportunity. Who else could he blame if he missed it? This feeling of satisfaction had always been there. Basically, Zhang Wufei could be happy for a long time after the event every time. It had almost become a habit, however. It had never crossed his mind that he would encounter a weirdo like Yun Yang when he took it out this time. He had unwillingly taken away the Sacred Heart Palace's most precious spiritual plant. The Sacred Heart Palace only had 2 stalks of this spiritual plant. From Zhang Wufei's point of view, Yun Yang would never give up on the art of magnificence that could lead straight to the saint level. Therefore, Zhang Wufei's plan was to pretend to be generous when Yun Yang was choosing the cultivation method. I'll give you all these spiritual jades as well. It was a display of the palace lord of the Sacred Heart Palace's grandeur. Art of magnificence was a cultivation method that could lead straight to the saint level. With Yun Yang's luck of becoming the leader of a middle-class celestial luck banner sect, how could he not want such a cultivation method? In the end, in reality, Yun Yang extended his hand and took away the amethyst peony that was not a gift but a tool used to show off. To Zhang Wufei, this was like a bolt from the blue. He was stunned. This was an unacceptable reality. This amethyst peony. Zhang Wufei was tongue-tied, not knowing what to say. He looked at the 3 deputy palace lords and great elder pleadingly. The 4 of them stared at him with perplexed eyes, then lowered their heads and shook their shoulders desperately. Oh no, I can't take it anymore. Perhaps the 4 of them had been waiting for this scene for a long time, or perhaps they just wanted to see a certain hall master make a fool of himself. In any case, not a single one of them spoke for a long time. Yun Yang said gratefully, "Palace Lord, you are so generous. The Sacred Heart Palace is indeed the top force in the bound of universe, to actually use such a spiritual herb as a reward. I know that this amethyst peony is another name for the famous fantasy spiritual herb, the soul-refining flower. Chapter 1165. Yunyang coughed and said no more. Leader Yun, the war between the demon race and the human race is about to begin. Zhan Wufei calmed himself down and said slowly, when the time comes, the Sacred Heart Palace will be the first to bear the brunt. Leader Yunyang, you must seize the time to cultivate. Don't let me down. Yunyang agreed, but his mind was racing, trying to guess the meaning behind Zhan Wufei's words. Zhan Wufei chuckled and handed over a ring, saying, since you've already made your choice, there's an amethyst peony in here. Also, 200 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jade, they're all yours. Once the war starts, it'll be inevitable that lives will be lost. The demon race has been dormant for a long time. Once they invade, they'll come in full force. I'm not sure if we can defend ourselves. Zhan Wufei's rough face revealed an indescribable sense of heroism as he said faintly, when the time comes, I'm afraid all the high-end martial artists will have to rush to the war immediately, in a very short time. The sects with celestial luck banners. Zhan Wufei looked at Yunyang and said word by word, this supreme-grade spiritual jade has always been a unique cultivation aid treasure of the Sacred Heart Palace. You must make good use of it. Use it piece by piece and strive to improve your cultivation base. He had suddenly changed his tone and the topic, and it was obvious that he had only said half of what he wanted to say. There seemed to be a deeper meaning behind it. Yunyang frowned in thought and said, Lord Palace Lord, if the Golden Condor King crossed the border this time, will there be a similar situation? Zhan Wufei's gaze was filled with admiration. Attacks like the Golden Condor Kings have happened frequently in recent years, and it's usually after the Celestial Luck Banner contest. In the beginning, it only happened once every few hundred years. But in recent centuries, it's been happening frequently. The demon kings who crossed the border previously mainly targeted upper-class sects or directly attacked the Sacred Heart Palace. But recently, they've been targeting middle-class celestial luck banners and lower-class sections. They've probably changed their strategy and are trying to take drastic measures. I have to say that this strategy is right. The damage to our side is greater than any previous time, and we've suffered heavy losses. But it's no big deal. How can there be a rainbow if there's no wind and rain? Survival of the fittest is an unchanging principle. Zhan Wufei laughed. The Sacred Heart Palace has been enjoying themselves for too long. He stood up and said, Sect Leader Yun, I believe we'll meet again in the future. Zhan Wufei laughed and said, Sect Leader, and he's Sect Leader, and left. The first elder, who had been silent all this while, only let out a light laugh. He stood up shakily and left, leaving only Deputy Palace Master Chun Ruoxue behind. Chun Ruoxue looked at Yunyang for a long time before she finally nodded and said, Leader Yun, please remember Lord Palace Lord's words. Yun was young though even though he was he was he. He went over Zhan Wufei's words word by word in his mind, but still could not find anything worth remembering. That Chun Ruoxue's words were just shooting at him. How could he not be confused? Zhan Wufei's words replayed in his mind, but he didn't find anything worth remembering. Chun Ruoxue's words were pointless. How could he not be confused? Chun Ruoxue did not bother to explain. She laughed and turned around to leave. In the next moment, Yunyang realized that he was already in the garden outside the hall. Then, the scenery in front of him changed. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Hua Yunfeng's courtyard. Yunyang stared at the spiritual qi mist before him. The bewilderment in his eyes deepened, almost suspecting that what had just happened was just a dream. However, the spatial ring that he had obtained was proof that everything that had happened just now was real. There was no way it could be faked. What does it mean? That night, Hua Yunfeng held a banquet. More than 300 people came to drink, and the atmosphere was very lively. Yunyang reminded Hua Yunfeng's relatives again. Don't let him use any mystical qi. Don't let him use any of it. The whole family took note of it. Yunyang watched as Hua Yunfeng drank and called his children and grandchildren over. They lined up neatly, including his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, 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 and the youngest son. There were more than 700 children and grandchildren in this large group. And this did not include those who were underage. It seemed that many of them were white-haired and senile. Just by looking at their faces, many of them looked more like the great ancestor than Hua Yunfeng. Hua Yunfeng ordered, "Kneel down and kowtow to your Uncle Yun. Ancestor Yun." Yun Yang was startled. What? Ancestor Yun? How could he be so senior? Where did this theory come from? Hearing the great ancestor's order, Yun Yang hurriedly stopped the group of old men who were about to kneel. Don't. It's not appropriate. Sweat trickled down Yun Yang's forehead. Old Hua, you're the great ancestor of your descendants, so it's reasonable and legal for you to be worshipped by them. But I can't. I'm only a few years old. If I were to be worshipped by such a group of people, I wouldn't be able to accept it. Brother, this is what I should do, Hua Yunfeng said seriously. Hua Yunfeng said seriously, you saved my life. What's wrong with them bowing to the great benefactor of our clan's patriarch? What do you want to do if you refuse? Do you want me, an old man, to kowtow to you and thank you for saving my life? Ding Byuk and Yu Bunning also came to persuade him, but no matter how they tried, Yun Yang refused. What a joke! If I really let these old men call me uncle, grandpa, and ancestor Yun. Yun Yang felt his scalp tingle, his limbs stiffen, and his heart freeze at the thought of it. It's really not good. After staying for 2 days, Yun Yang finally said goodbye and left under the warm send-off of the entire Hua family. On the other side, Hua Yunfeng had begun to chase them for their debts. Pu Deshuang and the others were chased by him, their faces full of resentment. Yun Yang walked out of the Sacred Heart Palace to a remote path that was completely devoid of people. After repeatedly confirming that there was no one around, he suddenly turned into a gust of wind and drifted away leisurely. For the first time, his long-lost manifestation powers appeared in the bound of universe. Not long after Yun Yang's figure disappeared, a person abruptly appeared in the place where he disappeared, her face full of confusion. It was Chun Ruoshui, the deputy temple leader of the Sacred Heart Palace. Where did this boy go? Why did he suddenly disappear? Chun Ruoshui looked puzzled. He disappeared inexplicably. What method did he use to leave? Isn't this secret technique a little too shocking? Chun Ruoshui looked around again and again, checking all the traces, and the doubts in his heart grew. Chun Ruoshui's cultivation base was above Hua Yunfeng's and slightly higher than that of the Golden Condor Kings. With his cultivation base, he naturally would not be discovered by Yun Yang if he secretly followed him, let alone let a junior with the cultivation base of a Saint King slip away without a trace. But now the fact was contrary to common sense. No matter what method Yun Yang had used to disappear without a trace, his ability was amazing and worthy of pride. Chun Ruoshui checked again and again, but he still had no clue. With a shake of his body, he disappeared. Did Yun Yang use the wind cloud manifestation because he sensed Chun Ruoshui's tracking? Of course not. Just like Chun Ruoshui's judgment, Yun Yang really did not have that ability at the moment. Everything was just a coincidence, a stroke of luck. Yun Yang had always been cautious. After leaving the Sacred Heart Palace's perimeter, he had used the wind cloud manifestation to ensure his own safety. Who knew if the demon clan's attack had come to an end? Through his communication with Zhang Wufei, it seemed that he, a newly advanced intermediate class, was also within the target range of the demon clan's experts. Secondly, he wanted to quickly hand over his gains this time to Emmy as soon as possible. Using the wind cloud manifestation was the safest handover method at the moment. Amidst the layers of clouds, Yun Yang focused his attention on the newly obtained spatial ring, confirming the amethyst peony herb within. It was better to just call it the Xueqi refining flower. The amethyst peony herb was really not that famous. After confirming that there was no mistake, he sent it into his deific consciousness space. Emmy squeaked happily when it saw it. The soul refining flower was extremely effective against the deific consciousness, and the soul. It was the heaven and earth treasure that Emmy lacked the most. With the soul refining flower's arrival, it could make up for this weakness to the greatest extent. Emmy planted the soul refining flower impatiently, paying attention to the large amount of chi of vitality without hesitation. The soul refining flower that had been greatly nourished recovered its vigor instantly, returning to its most flourishing state. Seeing that it could do something, Emmy used the sharp tip of its vine to gently scratch the soul-refining flower. Slowly, the soul-refining flower trembled slightly. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the end, Emmy actually split into 3 seedlings. Each seedling was only the size of a bean, but it was entirely purple, without a hint of other colors. The soul-refining flower that was universally acknowledged to be untransplantable had actually been successfully grown by Emmy into 3 seedlings. Yunyang almost fainted from the joy. This surprise could not have been any bigger. With these 3 soul-refining flowers, it was no different from reversing the fates of 3 experts that were destined to die. It was truly a rare treasure that could not be bought with money. Then, Yunyang looked at the supreme-grade spiritual jade. I'd like to see what's so special about this supreme-grade spiritual jade. To think that it's been exaggerated to such an extent that it's even stronger than my ethereal amethysts. This time, Yunyang had obtained 2 large sums of supreme-grade spiritual jade from Hua Yunfeng and Zhan Wufei. However, he had been free every day, and it was only now that he had the time to take a closer look at the legendary mystical items. Yunyang observed and sensed it carefully. As expected, his eyes lit up and he felt refreshed. His vision was filled with a dense purple qi, which was truly mystical. However, among the 200 supreme-grade spiritual jade he had obtained from the Sacred Heart Palace, there was one that was slightly different. It was glowing with a lustrous white light. It was exceptionally eye-catching amidst the purple qi's brilliance. What is this? Yunyang grabbed it and saw that it was a strange communication jade slip. The reason why it was strange was probably because the quality of this communication jade slip was many times stronger than ordinary ones. Although the design was disguised, Yunyang could still tell at a glance that this was a communication jade slip made of supreme-grade spiritual jade. There's indeed another secret. It's not so easy to accept the extra supreme-grade spiritual jade. Yunyang instinctively touched the jade slip with his divine sense, but he stopped immediately. He frowned and pondered for a moment. Then, he simply followed the wind and clouds and went straight into the residence of 9 Supremes. After his trip to the Sacred Heart Palace, Yunyang felt unsafe everywhere. He had to go to an absolutely safe place to deal with it. In the Sacred Heart Palace, Zhan Wufei, who was sitting with his legs crossed, suddenly opened his eyes with a cry of surprise. He had clearly felt that his divine sense had been touched, but then there was nothing else. Looking at the time, this kid should have gone out by now. He clearly touched the divine sense seal just now. Why is there no further movement? No. He should have opened my communication jade slip. But why didn't I sense anything at all? Unless he's in a place that's completely cut off from the rest of the world. But in this world, is there any place that can cut off the connection of my divine sense? This kid is full of mystery indeed. His providence far surpasses his peers. If I leave this to him, perhaps he can really succeed. Zhan Wufei's mind was filled with thoughts, but he closed his eyes again, a look of contemplation on his bearded face. As long as this kid is a little smarter, he can go anywhere in the world. It was only when Yunyang arrived at the residence of 9 Supremes that he really opened the communication jade slip. Just as he opened it, a soft sound was heard and a screen of light suddenly appeared before him. Inside the screen was a landscape of mountains and rivers. In the sky, countless demonic beasts were flying, blocking out the sun. There were eagles, cranes, and there seemed to be chickens as well. Below, there were human warriors and some huge demonic beasts in human form, but they were not in a complete state. Both sides were engaged in an intense battle. Zhan Wufei's voice rang out. This was the scene 7,000 years ago, when the demon race invaded. At that time, the 3 upper-class sects lost half of their forces. This battle only lasted for 10 days. When the humans reacted and wanted to launch a massive counterattack, the demon race had already retreated. Their official statement at that time was, "A demon race crown prince was lost." In that battle, hundreds of human experts died and dozens of people went missing, their whereabouts unknown. Everyone didn't think much of it then, thinking that the demon race had gone crazy once. What followed was another scene. Again, flying demonic beasts came and the 2 races fought. 6,000 years ago, another war broke out. This time, hundreds of people died and dozens of people went missing. 5,000 years ago, hundreds of people died and dozens of people went missing. 1,200 years ago, there was another ambush. Some people from the middle-class celestial luck banner sects died and some went missing. 700 years ago, 15 people went missing. 300 years ago, people from the middle-class and lower-class sects went missing. 90 years ago, the middle-class and lower-class sects went missing. Recently, 6 middle-class sects were attacked one after another and 3 lower-class sects were annihilated. On the surface, only the Golden Condor King's tribe came, but many of the people who went missing were not killed by the Golden Condor King's tribe. However, there were also 44 people who went missing. Among them, 21 of the middle-class sects were seeded disciples and 23 of the lower-class sects were missing. I suspect that the demon race's frequent invasions are not simply to create killing and chaos. Instead, they are more inclined to rob the human cultivators and bring them back. However, what exactly they want to do is thought-provoking and difficult to come to a conclusion. All these years, the Sacred Heart Palace is not completely inactive. However, no matter what the Sacred Heart Palace plans, the demon race knows about it in advance. No matter what arrangements they make, no matter how many ambushes they lay, the demon race will respond appropriately and suffer fewer losses. There's no doubt that there's something fishy going on in the Sacred Heart Palace. Regarding this matter, I've sent a few people to infiltrate the demon race to find out, but all the infiltrators died a violent death. Moreover, they were all found just after they went over. They didn't even have time to do anything. Even the secret arrangements that I've made in my own secret chamber will be found out by the other party. This traitor is a great misfortune for the human race. I've thought about it over and over again, but I can't come up with any countermeasures. I'm powerless. However, this matter concerns the future of the human race. We can't ignore it. We must catch the traitor in the Sacred Heart Palace as soon as possible before we can talk about the future. Sect Leader Yoon. If you're interested in this matter and want to help, there's a complete set of the demon race's cultivation technique in this jade slip. Whether it's demonic power, divine consciousness, or even identity and background, it includes everything. If you're not interested, it doesn't matter. A gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. I understand. If you want to go, consume the soul-refining flower first. It guarantees that your spirit won't be destroyed under any circumstances. Zhang Wufei's words stopped abruptly. However, the image continued. What followed was a detailed roadmap, as well as a detailed introduction of the demon race. Genius 1 Second Remember website. Mobile version. Chapter 1166. Cough. This was not a happy reason. He would make up for it tomorrow. It was too late to write, "I am the Supreme Being." He would make up for it tomorrow based on the situation. It was currently being typed. Please wait a moment. After the content was updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest updates. Chapter 1167. After reading it, Yoon Yang fell silent for a long time. After a long time, he finally stood up and put away the jade slip. His expression was calm as he drifted out of the residence of 9 Supremes and hurried to the place he had built. Along the way, Yoon Yang's mind was in turmoil. It was rare for him to be calm. Naturally, he was thinking about the jade slip Zhang Wufei had given him and its contents. Obviously, this was a private mission that Zhang Wufei had assigned to him. Moreover, it was a top-secret mission that only Zhang Wufei, the Lord of Sacred Heart Palace, knew about. It seemed that the initiative was in his hands now, and he could accept it if he wanted to or not if he did not want to. But, was this really the case? Since Zhang Wufei had given him this, it meant that it was impossible for him not to accept it. He had even given him all the things that could prevent accidents, and even included the most detailed introduction, the meticulous route, the perfect identity and background, and even the righteousness of the entire human race. Under such a premise, if he still refused, he would be ignorant of morality, disregarding human relations, and being heartless and unjust. In short, there would be nothing good about it. He would be seeking death, and there would be no benefit in this world. This Sacred Heart Palace Lord, is this how he thanks people? Yoon Yang was extremely depressed about the current situation. Isn't this a trap? He looks extremely straightforward, like a bandit, a hot-headed character without any schemes. But this hidden scheme is *king deep as the ocean. Perhaps the matter was not so complicated. Although it was dangerous, the benefits, or rather, the price paid by the other party was also great. The soul-refining flower was a dream item that could ensure the eternal stability of the soul of the person who consumed it. Other than the 2 stalks in Zhang Wufei's hands, there might not be another one in this world. Even if there were, it would be even more difficult to obtain. This soul-refining flower was most likely a backup for this mission. The so-called gift to thank him for saving Hui Yunfeng was, in fact, only the first 2 items: supreme-grade spiritual jade and the godly might skill. Unexpectedly, he had given up the spiritual treasure and the skill and chosen the 3rd item, the amethyst peony. That was how he had managed to achieve this by a fluke. He had made this happen. If that was the case, then wouldn't his scheme against the purple crystal peony herb be a self-destructive act? If that's the case, then it's fine. If the infiltration of the demon clan was a last-minute move by Zhang Wufei, then this person's intelligence and adaptability are too terrifying. Sigh, how is it possible for a simple-minded person to reach the position of Sacred Heart Palace Lord? It should be said that I underestimated the people of the world. Yun Yang sighed. This matter, I still need to think about it carefully. Perhaps there is still a way. However, this matter can't be considered as me committing suicide. Since I'm already here, no matter what I choose, I'm afraid that I won't be able to escape this mission. I'm afraid that when they found out that I was escorting Hui Yunfeng back, they had already arranged for me to do this. Yun Yang heaved a long sigh. The strange battle is without nothing? I don't blame you. Zhang Wufei was also helpless. There was almost no one around him that he could completely trust, so this was the only way. However, as he ran forward in the sky and let his imagination run wild, he suddenly heard the sound of metal clashing from below. A somewhat familiar yet long-lost voice guffawed. Run, run! Ha ha ha, let's see where you can run to. A voice filled with grief and indignation said, Lei Dongtian, don't go too far. I'm from the Zenith Heaven sect. Your Lei family may be powerful, but our Zenith Heaven sect is not to be trifled with. The arrogant voice guffawed again. Now that things have come to this, so what if you scream louder? I'm going to eat you up today. Scream, scream again, scream louder. Ha! This is... As Yun Yang's thoughts raced, a sense of joy surged into his heart. Lei Dongtian. He had unexpectedly reunited with this fellow. Speaking of which, it had been a long time since he had seen this fellow. He had been puzzled for a long time back then. How could this fellow be so arrogant that day, claiming that he would return to Tianxian soon to uproot the Four Seasons Tower and turn Mr. Nian into ashes? However, there had been no news of him after he returned to the Bound of Universe. Yun Yang had thought that he would never cross paths with this person again, but he had unexpectedly met him here. Of course, Yun Yang would not miss the chance to reunite with an old friend, especially one who appeared to be a brother and a friend but was actually an unresolvable grudge. He dove down quietly to see what was going on. Judging from the commotion, this fellow seemed to be robbing someone from the Zenith Heaven sect. This fellow had guts. Guts were secondary, but how could he possibly have such capability? When they had parted that day, this fellow's cultivation base was only slightly higher than the Four Seasons Tower's ice, frost, snow, sword, and the other venerable lords. At most, he was at the level of a superior supreme. He was indeed not weak back then, but he was no longer worthy of Yun Yang's attention now. Yun Yang was only hesitating whether he should kill him directly or leave him to Ji Lingxi. Back then, Ji Lingxi had hated him to the core. Below. He actually didn't choose to rob by the side of the forest. It's not some secluded place either. What kind of robbery is this? As a former robber, Yun Yang was shocked by what he saw. The place where the incident happened was a busy official road. A robbery had actually happened right in the middle of the road. For the sake of a whole circle of lay family members, a man and a woman were trapped in the core. This was not surprising, but what was surprising was, there was another large group of people watching the show from a distance, forming a third party. Yun Yang felt dizzy at the sight before him. Is this a robbery? Isn't this too blatant? I thought the Bound of Universe's God forbid such a robbery? Lei Dongtian, the only person Yun Yang was familiar with, was standing boldly on a large chair that he had moved out of nowhere. His arms were behind his back as he assumed an elegant posture, His chin raised as he guffawed arrogantly. Zenith Heaven Sect, haha. So what if it's Zenith Heaven Sect? How dare you snatch something that my beloved woman's younger sister's cousin's husband's brother's concubine has taken a liking to? I'll tell you clearly today, if you don't hand it over to me, today will be your burial ground. No one can save you. The reason was so compelling that it rendered Yun Yang speechless. What was even more peculiar was that Yun Yang felt a sense of familiarity from the scene once again. It was rather familiar. Yun Yang pulled someone beside him and asked, "Brother, what's going on? What's going on here? Why is it so lively here?" Looking at Yun Yang's noble bearing, he seemed to have some background, especially his outstanding looks. Naturally, the man dared not ignore him. He chuckled, his mustache twitching as he said, "Isn't this all because the two Daluo sect disciples in the middle didn't handle things properly? They reap what they sow." Yun Yang was stunned by the sudden answer. He had never thought that it would be like this. How angry were the two people from Daluo sect? Lei Dongtian had already acted in such a manner, yet he still had to give an unscrupulous evaluation? What's going on? Can you tell me? Recently, this Mr. Lei has fallen in love with another girl. This is something that everyone in this area knows, and it's not a rare occurrence. And the cause of this is, the cousin of this girl's bestie came to visit her. Coincidentally, this girl was with her bestie, so she accompanied her bestie to go shopping. Along with this cousin was her husband. He brought his brother, and his brother brought his concubine. This concubine was born with a chronic disease. Her blood was cold, and she couldn't conceive. Coincidentally, she found someone selling 9-yang grass while she was shopping. It was the medicine that could cure her chronic disease. Naturally, she went to buy it. Yun Yang's head was spinning from the complicated relationship, his mind spinning. What kind of relationship was this? You can guess what happened next. The two Zenith Heaven sect disciples saw the 9-yang grass first and were discussing the price. They had already reached an agreement and bought the 9-yang grass first. The brother and concubine of this cousin's husband naturally didn't want to give up, but they refused to sell it no matter what. A conflict broke out between the two sides. The two Daluo sect disciples wanted to leave, but the woman young Master Lei fancied couldn't stand it and went forward to stop them. In the end, she was scolded. Therefore, young Master Lei flew into a rage and mobilized the clan's thunder guards to demand an explanation. Together with the 9-yang grass, Yun Yang's mind grew increasingly muddled. You've explained it for a long time, and it's very detailed, but why do I only understand half of it? These two Daluo sect disciples had probably stolen something that someone related to Lei Dongtian wanted. Although their relationship was not very close. However, Lei Dongtian had to perform to please his sweetheart so that he could win her heart. This was a must. He believed that Lei Dongtian could not afford to lose face in front of the girl he liked. As a result, he directly intercepted the two of them here. As long as this matter was done well, he would first get the prize and then please the family of his sweetheart. Then, it would be a matter of time before he won the heart of his sweetheart. Based on this reason, he made the path of Tao of Calamity as a bystander, as high profile as he wanted to be. Brother, this isn't right. Didn't you say that the two Daluo sect disciples weren't particular? Why did you say that it was the two Daluo sect disciples who bought the item first? According to this, doesn't it mean that young Master Lei's relative wanted to forcefully buy the item from them but they didn't intend to sell it? You can't say that the Daluo sect disciples are in the wrong, can you? Perhaps they also urgently need that 9-yang grass? Yun Yang was puzzled. He spoke bluntly. Sai, this conflict depends on the other party. This is the Lei family's territory. If they refuse to let go, it means that they're not giving face to the Lei family. They've offended young Master Lei, so of course they've brought all the suffering upon themselves. The man rolled his eyes and said, Young Master Lei has already made his stance clear, yet they still insist on not giving and even brought up the Daluo sect to raise their price. Isn't this an attempt to bully the weak? How is this not being particular? Yun Yang felt lightheaded and said, Big brother, it's obviously young Master Lei who's being unreasonable first. What do you mean first? Being reasonable? Brother, you're new here, aren't you? The man rolled his eyes at Yun Yang and clicked his tongue. How strange. How strange. When has our young Master Lei ever been reasonable? You don't even know this. You're lacking in martial world experience. Yun Yang's eyes widened. At this moment, Yun Yang was struck with a sudden realization as he realized where his sense of familiarity came from. This was the feeling he had when he was in Tianqian continent, watching Dong Tianling and the rest of the 4 great young masters conduct themselves. He had taken it as a fact that they were the ones who bullied the weak and acted in a domineering manner. Lei Dongtian, on the other hand, was obviously at a higher level. This fellow had already taken his unreasonableness a step further, to the point where others did not find it strange at all and came to the conclusion that young Master Lei was the unreasonable one. He was the idol and legend of the Popinjay's world. Even if Dong Tianling and the other 3 came together, they would still be in awe of the spectacle and admit their inferiority to him. As he spoke, the man suddenly turned to look at Yun Yang suspiciously. His eyes darted around as he asked tentatively, "Who are you? Are you not a relative of the Lei family? Then why are you dressed so nicely here?" Yun Yang was dumbfounded. "It's my habit to dress nicely. Why must I be a relative of the Lei family? I can't even dress nicely here if I'm not a relative of the Lei family? What kind of rule is this? What kind of rule is this?" Just as he was complaining in his heart, he heard the man beside him suddenly call out, young Master Lei, there's a pretty boy spy here. He's trying to find out about you. This person must be up to no good." With this shout, the surrounding people all retreated in unison. There was only one person left standing in the large, empty space. It was so eye-catching that it was impossible not to notice him. The one who remained was, of course, Yun Yang, the eldest young Master Yun, a pretty boy who was dressed nicely. At that moment, the 40 to 50 Lei guards, eldest young Master Lei, his gang of scoundrels, and the 2 Daluo sect disciples all turned to look at him in unison. Suddenly being the center of attention, Yun Yang felt like he had been F***ed. Although he had come down to meet Lei Dongtian, perhaps to settle some matters of the past, being thrown out like this was an embarrassing situation that he had never expected. The person who was talking to him was also a martial artist. Although his cultivation was not high, it was rare for a martial artist to have no moral integrity to such an extent. It was really rare to see a martial artist hugging a thick thigh to such an extent. As Lei Dongtian turned to look, he suddenly cried out in surprise, "Brother Yun!" Before his voice could echo in the air, he had already dashed over and hugged Yun Yang, almost tearing up in joy. He sobbed, "Brother, I thought I would never see you again in this lifetime. You've finally come up. This is wonderful, wonderful." Being hugged by a man, Yun Yang stiffened all over, not knowing how to react for a moment. What was going on? Lei Dongtian's enthusiasm caught him off guard and he could not defend against it. Not only was Yun Yang's body stiff, even his thoughts were a little stiff. If Lei Dongtian were to use this skill on Yun Yang, he would definitely be hit. Yun Yang did not have a good impression of Lei Dongtian from the beginning. Not at all. Back then, in order to cultivate his 7 emotions praxis, this fellow had chased after Ji Lingxi and the other girls for thousands of miles. He did not pursue them properly but played them like a cat catching mice. Similarly, he had used Yun Yang as a companion to cultivate the 7 emotions praxis. Of course, Yun Yang had only been using Lei Dongtian from the beginning. The desire to kill him had always been there, and it was still the same until now. All in all, the relationship between the 2 of them had not reached the point where they would hug upon meeting. Besides, there was still the matter of his 6th brother Supreme Thunder between him and Lei Dongtian's Lei family. There was no way he could avoid it. Brother. Lei Dongtian hugged Yun Yang, his eyes brimming with tears. "I miss you so much. It's not that I don't want to look for you, but I really can't. I've been worried about you all this time. I can't sleep at night. I'm not energetic when I cultivate during the day. I miss you when I eat. I miss you when I drink. I miss you day and night. I can't eat or sleep." Goosebumps rose all over Yun Yang's body as he stared at Lei Dongtian in a daze. All the Lei guards, as well as the crowd of onlookers, were dumbfounded and speechless for a long time without exception. This treacherous pretty boy was actually young Master Lei's brother? It looked like their relationship was not shallow either. If not for the fact that they were all men, they would have thought that they were a couple who had been separated for many years, quietly reuniting on the war-torn streets. Some of the more cunning ones instantly made the connection. As the saying goes, one doesn't know where one's feelings start. Once you look at him, it doesn't matter if he's a human or not. Not to mention that this gigolo's looks are really outstanding. Maybe it's just a possibility. Cough, cough. How have you been, Brother Lei? Yun Yang finally snapped out of his trance and struggled to push away Lei Dongtian, who was still extremely emotional and unwilling to let go. Rolling his eyes, he said, "We haven't seen each other for only a few days. Why are you so passionate?" Lei Dongtian said emotionally, "Brother, you don't know how much I worry about you every day, how much I miss you, how much I miss you. There's no one else in my heart anymore." On the other side, the two Daluo sect disciples felt an indescribable sense of hopelessness when they saw that reinforcements had arrived. It looked like the 9-yang grass was destined to be lost. The young man in purple said, "We brothers have reunited after a long time. It's a great day. Let's not make things unpleasant today. Let these two from Daluo sect go." Lei Dongtian guffawed and said generously, "Yes, yes, yes. Today is a great day for us. Since my brother has spoken, let them go." As he spoke, he waved his hand and said, "Both of you are lucky today. My brother and I have reunited after a long time. I'm in a good mood, so I won't snatch the 9-yang grass from you. Leave now." A greasy-haired fellow in colorful clothes said anxiously, "Young Master Lei, the 9-yang grass." Lei Dongtian hollered, "What are you talking about? Shut the hell up. What 9-yang grass? It's a great thing that my brother is here today. Don't be ignorant. Let me tell you, if you dare to spoil my brother's mood, I'll beat you to death." The man's face turned pale. He sniffed and ducked to the side, lowering his head and daring not to speak. Only the newcomers can be heard laughing, but the old ones can be heard crying. Our young lady has not even become a newcomer yet, but she has already become an old one. What are you waiting for? Lei Dongtian turned and scowled. What are you standing there for? What are you waiting for? The man and woman were overjoyed. They bowed deeply and said, "Thank you, young Master Lei. Thank you, young master. May I ask for this young master's name?" "I'm Xiao Yuqing and Hua Xiaorong from Daluo sect. I'll repay you generously for your help today." Yun Yang smiled warmly and said, "I'm Yun Yang. I've met your sect leader once during the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner. It's just a small matter today. You don't have to be so courteous. It's better for both of you to leave as soon as possible." "Thank you." The two men remembered the name and left after thanking him profusely. Watching them leave, Lei Dongtian laughed and said, "Brother, let's go for a drink." As he spoke, he took Yun Yang's hand, intending to hold it and leave. Yun Yang shuddered and struggled to break free. He smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Lei, I'm not used to your intimacy. It's not good to be seen by others, not good at all." "Ha ha ha." Lei Dongtian laughed arrogantly. "Brother, you're too cautious. Who dares to say a bad word about me, Lei Dongtian, within a radius of 10,000 miles? Don't worry, brother." Before his voice trailed off, he reached out to pull Yun Yang again. Yun Yang dodged quickly, feeling that something was wrong. This fellow. Could it be that he had actually gone mad? Why were his words and actions completely different from before? Although he used to be very warm, his attitude was still very perfunctory. Yun Yang could see through the hypocrisy and condescending attitude at a glance. Now, however, that feeling was all gone. There was only sincerity, only familiarity. This was something that couldn't be faked at all. Yun Yang could not figure it out no matter how hard he thought about it. If he were Lei Dongtian, he would be very warm to his cultivation cauldron, but he would not act like this. There must be a problem here. A big problem. "Brother Lei, you seem to have changed a lot from before." Yun Yang said tentatively. Lei Dongtian laughed out loud and said, "You must be wondering why my actions are so unrestrained and unrestrained. I'm treating you well, right? Let's have a good chat when the dishes are served. You'll understand once I explain and be happy for me." Yun Yang nodded and said, "All right." Sure enough, there was another reason behind this, but he didn't know what it was. Could it be that this guy's 7 emotions praxis had reached the advanced level? Well, it was very likely that this guy's current cultivation level was much higher than before. "All of you don't have to follow me. I'm going to have a drink with my brother. We have something to talk about in private. Go do what you need to do." Lei Dongtian waved his hand casually. "Second young master. It's all right, I'm with my brother. Will he harm me? Don't worry. Let's go, brother. I'll bring you to a delicious place. We won't go home until we're drunk. As he spoke, Lei Dongtian had already dragged Yun Yang far away. Only his eyeballs were left on the ground. Was this person who was loyal and generous to his friends really Lei Dongtian's young master Lei? Could it be that the gigolo was really that outstanding? After a while, both of them were already in a small tavern. It was an extremely simple tavern. Although the tavern was small, the surrounding scenery was elegant. There were plum trees in all directions. Although it was already summer and the plum blossoms had not yet bloomed, the greenery of the trees still made people feel that they were brimming with vitality. Among the trees, there was a thatched shed that was filled with the charm of the mountains. A wine flag stretched out in a slanted manner, with a huge word written on it, "Wine." This place used to be my Lei family's plum forest. Ever since young Miss Bai came here, I gave this plum forest to her. Young Miss Bai is proficient in the art of cooking, and is even more familiar with the way of brewing wine. She can make good dishes. She's really a rare peerless beauty. She's pleasing to the eye and relaxing to look at. During this period of time, I've basically been coming here to drink wine every single day. This is considered as a unique private place. Look at this elegance, this decorations, this exquisite spirit. It's all ingenuity and ingenuity that surpasses the heavens. It's only brother like you, I absolutely won't allow anyone else to come. Miss Bai. I'm here to drink again. Lei Dongtian chattered along the way. In the end, he called out directly. An elegant voice said faintly, "Young Master Lei is really elegant and rich. If it were an ordinary family, young Master Lei would have gone bankrupt long ago." The words were obviously mocking Lei Dongtian for being a prodigal son. He did not hide it at all. Yun Yang's first feeling was that it was going to be bad. Based on his understanding of Lei Dongtian and his way of doing things, he was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Hearing such blatant mockery, it would be considered a light punishment if he were to hit him directly. Unexpectedly, young Master Lei was well-mannered and did not mind it at all. He walked in with a laugh and led Yun Yang straight up to the second floor. They found a small pavilion that was surrounded by thatched grass and sat down, laughing. It's already a great thing to be proud of one's life. Today, I have a good brother coming from afar. It's double happiness. How can I not get drunk? Good wine and good food. Come. We won't go home until we're drunk today. Let's share the sorrow of eternity. There was a hint of elegance in her words. Even the poem that was tailored was not entirely elegant. The girl's voice snorted again. Then, the sound of pots and spatulas colliding could be heard in the kitchen. I remember Brother Lei saying that the Lei family that you're from is a force in the bound of universe and is quite capable. Yun Yang smiled and said, but I'm afraid it's not at the level where you can rob Daluo sect, a middle-class celestial luck banner school. I'm really impressed by what I've seen today. It turns out that Brother Lei has been hiding a lot in front of me back then. Lei Dongtian squinted and chuckled, saying, What do you mean hiding? This foolish brother of mine was like that back then. Now, it's just that we've met again in these 2 years. May I ask what great opportunity my brother has had to change so much? Even if you don't ask, I'll explain it to you in detail. This is a great opportunity for the Lei family. Lei Dongtian laughed. 2 years ago, someone suddenly came looking for us and said that the Lei family is the direct descendant of our elder ancestor who had wandered outside. Now, of course, we're returning to the family. Later, when we were sorted according to the genealogy, I found out that our elder ancestor has always been alive. Back then, it was only because of some issues of family interests that our ancestor made a mistake and was chased out of the mansion. However, thousands of years have passed. Elder ancestor feels that the family is incomplete and that it's not a good thing for the bloodline to wither. Therefore, he asked us to return to the family. The tree is thousands of feet tall, and the fallen leaves return to their roots. After all, we're of the same breath and branch. Lei Dongtian could not help but look like he wanted to show off. Brother, do you know who our elder ancestor is? A silhouette flashed across Yun Yang's mind, but he still asked, I wonder who the elder ancestor is. Heh, you'll be shocked if I tell you. Lei Dongtian snorted and said proudly, Our elder ancestor is actually someone we couldn't even dream of reaching before, the great elder of the Sacred Heart Palace. The fifth most powerful person in the Sacred Heart Palace. Lei Dongtian's face was full of glory and pride. His face was full of pride and he was in high spirits. Yun Yang's face was also instantly filled with shock. It's actually, really, unexpected. Such a pleasant surprise. However, in his heart he thought, it really is him. So the Lei family has changed so much. It's actually because the great elder of the Sacred Heart Palace has recognized them as relatives. However, there's something strange about this matter. It's understandable that this great elder has survived for thousands of years. But isn't it a little ridiculous to say that he doesn't know that his descendants are outside until now? It's even more ridiculous to say that he wants to recognize them. Wouldn't he have done it a long time ago if he really wanted to? Why did he have to wait until now? Thousands of years have passed, and dozens of people have died. Only now does he want to recognize them. No matter how I think about it, there's something indescribably strange about it. Brother, didn't you say that I've changed? Lei Dongtian said proudly. I can't not change. Since I've recognized my ancestors, my previous cultivation method is simply sh*t compared to the elder ancestors' cultivation method. The 7 emotions praxis and the transplanting of experts remains into the body are all inferior cultivation methods. How can I not abandon them as soon as possible? Therefore, the entire Lei family has destroyed our original foundation and recultivated the exclusive Lei family cultivation method passed down by the elder ancestor. That's why I can be so powerful now. I have to say that the elder ancestor's cultivation method is really amazing. This is the cultivation method that is most suitable for the Lei family's direct descendants. Lei Dongtian sighed. It seemed that the change in this fellow's temperament was most likely due to the destruction of the 7 emotions praxis, resulting in a backlash and a sharp change in his temperament. As expected, Lei Dongtian then looked a little bashful and said, speaking of the 7 emotions praxis, this foolish brother has a great deal of guilt towards you. When I was with you in the past, you were sincere to me, but I had other requests. I harbored evil intentions and plotted against you. The 7 emotions praxis is truly an evil cultivation method, extremely unbearable. When I returned to the family this time, of course, the cultivation method was destroyed at once. However, this cultivation method has a profound effect on one's temperament. Towards the end, he raised his wine goblet in embarrassment and looked at Yun Yang before draining it in one gulp. I knew that this fellow had suffered a backlash. Just from the way he speaks, how can there be no reason? Yun Yang pondered. Back then, Lei Dongtian had secretly schemed to use Yun Yang as a cauldron to cultivate the 7 emotions divine skill. He had already cultivated it to a profound level. He only needed to betray Yun Yang once to cause him heartache, and the path of friendship related to Yun Yang would be considered a success. Lei Dongtian's cultivation base would then advance to another level. Back then, Lei Dongtian had used this cultivation method to suppress the 4 venerable lords of frost, snow, sword, and sword. Its power was remarkable, but he was immediately suppressed by Mr. Nian. He was severely injured and had to flee for his life. Naturally, he had no time to target Yun Yang, the cauldron. He could only bury Yun Yang's deep friendship with him and his deep apologies to Yun Yang deep in his heart. After that, the Lei family changed and returned to its roots. The entire family turned to cultivate a brand new cultivation method of a higher level. All the previous cultivation achievements had gone up in flames. It was still unknown if the rest of the Lei family had other hidden dangers, but Lei Dongtian's was obvious. The 7 emotions praxis was based on the heart, so the backlash on the heart was especially severe. Yun Yang had been pretending to be courteous back then, but Lei Dongtian did not know about it. He had truly treated Yun Yang as his bosom friend. Once his cultivation method had backfired, he was filled with remorse for his hypocrisy in the past and had turned all of it into true feelings, without any pretense. To use an inappropriate analogy, even if Yun Yang were to stab him now and cause him to go bankrupt and break up his family, even if Yun Yang were to do something to him, he would still think that Yun Yang was his good brother, a brother who treated him with all his heart. He must have his reasons for doing this and treating me like this. I must understand him, cooperate with him, and treat him better. Lei Dongtian was definitely not a good person. Throughout his entire life, he might not even have a bit of sincerity towards his own parents, his wife, and his son. However, There was still one person in this world who could make him give up everything without any regrets. That person was Yoon Young. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.